In that case, I would like to welcome Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Jacqueline Hughes, who is now the new Director General at ICRISAT, Professor R.B. Singh, Dr. Gautam, Dr. T.R. Sharma, Dr. Vassal will be joining, and Dr. Prabhu, Dr. Kondania, Dr. A.K. Singh, Dr. Praveen Rao, Dr. Yadav, most of the directors of institutes dealing with food grain crops, distinguished participants from various universities and institutions. I understand two vice chancellors also are expected to join subsequently. And also we have from private sector participation, besides Dr. Kondania, of other colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great privilege for advancement of agriculture sciences to host this workshop in participation with the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, for which I thank Dr. Mahapatra and Dr. T.R. Sharma profoundly, because it is a subject which is of great relevance, not only to ICR, but also to all of us for our food and nutrition security. Having said this, ICR is the lead organization which has not only helped the nation in achieving food security from an era of, I would say, scarcity to that self-sufficiency, and even to a level of export, is a great achievement over the last more than 5 decades since we had witnessed Green Revolution. In this context, we are very pleased to organize this workshop on very relevant and important subject, that is in fact, the topic is bridging the yield gap to enhance food grain production. Why this is so relevant and important in current context? Someone may say already in some quarters complacency of having buffer stocks and godowns for more than almost 70 to 80 million tons. We are exporting tons of food grains now, where we used to import at one time more than 10 million tons. And the scenario has completely changed. But obviously we are aware that there are challenges that are emerging. Challenge of total sector productivity decline, challenge of natural resource conservation, and also challenge relating to climate change. And currently we are facing the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic. In that respect, we also are aware of the developments that have taken place in other sectors besides food grain crops, and that is in horticulture and livestock and fishery, where the food basket has enhanced substantially. And in that respect, whatever estimates we had made in the past possibly would require revisit, in the context that now our consumption of food grain is no more 180 kg per person per year, but it seemed to have declined to 140 kg. On the other side, we are likely to be the most populous country in the world, overtaking China probably by 2030 or even earlier. But thanks to their policy decision of now allowing more than one child to go up to 3, that scenario may change, but it would all depend as we move forward. In this regard, it is also very clear that food grains in future will also possibly be needed for other uses like feed and also for fuel. That is happening elsewhere. And we would have to compete. And India has become one of the three largest food grain exporting countries in the world. And we need to also ensure that we not only continue being one among the three, but become maybe one of the best in some of the crops, such as wheat, where we are number two after US. At one time, we had organized a debate at national level involving ICR and TAS and NAS, whether we can achieve 100 million tons of wheat. And that was in 2010. And we thought whether it will be possible by 2015. Many of the participants, including at that time Dr. Rajaram, who is no more with us, were skeptical of achieving it. But in 2018, we have achieved and crossed the 100 million ton wheat production. We have also done remarkably well in case of maize. We had organized a conference also in 2008 on maize and looked at the impact of single cross maize hybrids in one decade after the release of first single cross maize hybrid in the public sector, which we had insisted upon through a hybrid program. It doubled our maize production and also increased productivity, which was never above 1 ton, but now it is more than 2 tons. The highest growth rate among food grain crops is of maize now, currently beyond almost 5%. We therefore see that there are opportunities. We also find that there is no possibility of horizontal expansion for increasing production and productivity. In that respect, we will have to go vertical. We will have to use new tools of genetic engineering, of marker assisted selection, of genome editing, and of improving the production to the level that still is needed to bring in more per unit area. So we will have to go vertical rather than horizontal. And in that respect, we also see the options of now moving from single pillar approach, which we had during Green Revolution time, to that of now twin pillar approach, and sometimes we call it three-legged approach. That is genotype into environment into management, which means we would require now good agronomic practices. We would require better management of our natural resources. We will have to bring in efficiency in our production system, and we have to bridge the gap. The gap also for yield has to be vertical as well as horizontal. Vertical, we see that genetic potential is much higher for many crops, but the yields at the experimental fields are not to the highest level, which is otherwise projected. And at the farmer's field, it is even much less. And in some states, even the production is less than the national average. So we need to move vertical in terms of productivity enhancement as well as horizontal by going in for eco-regional and by going in for interstate or state-to-state variations that are occurring. In that context, Huda committee report had examined in 2010, submitted to the government, which was that time approved, in which I was actively involved. We had done an exercise and we could see that if we even bring in those states which are lagging behind in their national average and improve their productivity level, we will be able to achieve easily 30 million tons additional food grains. Now we need a strategy. Now we have to be more efficient. We have to be globally efficient. Even if we have to compete in future for export of our food grains, we will have to bring in efficiency. And we have to see that whatever is the genetic potential that is available is harnessed. And for that, we would require a clear strategy. And I'm sure this particular workshop is going to help us in achieving those objectives. I don't want to go into further details crop-wise and also in the context of our strategy for future, but we shall have to revisit. A report which was given by a committee which I happened to head for the Planning Commission in 2010 on increasing pulse production did not find a favor for implementation till it was recognized and realized that we need to produce more pulse crops for nutrition security. And we are the only country who are having maximum production and maximum area and maximum consumption. So under the National Food Security Mission, the emphasis was given to those important critical 3-4 recommendations only. And those 4 recommendations led to, in just 3 years' time, Dr. Mahapatra would probably tell us that we could achieve self-sufficiency even in pulses. The shortfall of 4 to 5 million tons could be achieved just in 2 years' time. So you need a missionary approach. There is a mission on food grain production. This mission needs to be revisited. There is also need for looking at crop-wise strategy for improving our strategy for not only having more area covered under new and high-yielding varieties, nutritious varieties, or varieties that have been evolved by institutions like ICR and ICRISAT and biofortified crops and so on. We need to go in for nutrition security. And second green revolution is not for food security, but for nutrition security. And in that respect, millets would require attention, minor millets would require attention, pulses would require attention, and maybe we will have to bring in fold, like China has the soybean as food crop, and including that in food grains, and potato in food crops, including that as food grains. So food crops. So in that context, we will have to think in the context of expanding and having overall strategy and look at what are the ways by which we can, and UN has announced already 2023 as year of millets. So there is all the future for which we have to work hand in hand. Green revolution was possible because of partnership with international centers. ICRISAT has a therefore important role to play. ICARDA has important role to play for lentils. Sarkar will tell us later. And also in that respect, the CIMIT and IRI, we will hear from also our colleagues, Dr. Mia and Dr. Joshi, in terms of what jointly can be achieved. And having said all this, I see that there is a great opportunity. Possibly this workshop which has been organized is timely, and it may give us a roadmap in terms of how to proceed further and overcome some of those gaps that are existing, whether vertical, horizontal in terms of genetic potential, or even in the context of horizontal expansion by replacing some of the crops that are not so efficient in productivity. And for that, hybrid rice also was one option which we thought would make an impact, but still area is not much, and therefore public-private partnership also would be required and would require good, right policies, right environment. So with this, I would like to stop here and would like to say how pleased we are. I see many other colleagues who have joined. Now it is around 78 number. Time would not permit me to call all those who have joined us later individually, but hopefully they will contribute in our deliberations further. So with this, I am so pleased that today we have with us one of our senior colleagues and also agriculture research manager and leader, Professor R.B. Singh. Uh, would like to have his views. He is co-chairing this inaugural session with me. Thank you, Professor Singh, for joining us, and for we look towards your input and your guidance.
Thank you, Dr. Paroda, for your kind words. And to begin with, Professor Paroda, Professor Mahapatra, Dr. Jacqueline Hughes, and of course, a large number of outstanding distinguished colleagues who are participating in this meeting. I see Dr. Deepak Pentel appearing right here. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to each one of you. Let me express my gratitude to Professor Paroda and to the task team for giving me an opportunity to participate in this very important meeting, because the topic, as mentioned by Dr. Paroda, is highly topical and timely, as our Prime Minister has pledged for doubling farmers' income, to make India Atmanirbhar, and also to build a $5 trillion economy. And none of these things are possible unless the gap in the yield and productivity is bridged. As a matter of fact, as we all know, as mentioned, by the year 2030, India will be the most populous country, 1.51 billion people in the world, the largest, exceeding China by more than 1.4, I will say, while China will be 1.4 billion and we shall be about 1.51 billion. So almost 100 million people in India will be extra as compared to China. We are off track, unfortunately, in meeting our SDG 1 and SDG 2. And this is very unfortunate, because the longer we remain off track, the future will become much more darker. We should also remember that by the year 2050, India's population will be around 1.775, some people say 1.8 billion, out of the nearly 9.9 billion people in the world. So at that time, China will still be 1.4. So we will be exceeding China by about 400 million people by 2050. So I'm giving this comparison to just give you the dimension of the additional people that we will have to feed with the ever shrinking resources. The land fragmentation is continuing. We have reached almost about the per farming household land average area of about 1 hectare only. And the land, water, and biodiversity resources are shrinking every day. Our population today being 18% of the world population, based on only 2.3% of the world land area available for agriculture and 4% of agricultural water of the world, we have to feed the about 18 to 20% of the world population. Therefore, we need the transformation that has been brought about by Green Revolution to be further fortified, and India has to become a very major exporter of many of the commodities. For example, it is demonstrated that Ashok is here, that from basmati rice alone, this year we were able to earn about 10 billion US dollar through the export. So I think here are new opportunities which possibly had to be captured immediately. Our average yields, unfortunately, still continue to be low, and for most commodities, although we are at around the world average, but for several of them, we are below the world average, and still about half of that in China, as well as in USA and some other countries. So our yield levels per se have to be improved. Plus, we have, of course, the within country, the yield level differences at the various levels. to increase our food grain production by 70 to 100% towards 2050 and by about 16 to 17% towards 2030. We have to bridge this yield gap as the most critical and most important requirement. Special attention will need to be given to crops like oilseeds, pulses, mentions on maize, minor millets, nutri cereals, as a matter of fact. And very often we forget that we are still depending on about 70% of the total oilseed import for our meeting our national needs, while we have tremendous opportunity in soybean and mustard, including some of the discoveries made by our distinguished colleagues who are present here, like Dr. Deepak Pentel and so on. The increase will have to come from the increase in productivity because we have no room for horizontal expansion. So the vertical growth is the only way to grow in that process. And the average rate, if you see, we have a long way to go. If you see today that the average growth rate of our total factor productivity is today hardly 1%. And this is despite that our average yields are not too high. On the top of that, our growth rate is still very low, only 1%. But also, important difficulty is that it varies in the country from state to state in a very big way. While Tamil Nadu has the average TFP enhancement rate of about 2.9%, we have as low as 0.19%, 0.21%, and in many of the states like Bihar, and including Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, and West Bengal, as well as Assam. These are very low. States like Punjab, which are supposed to have been showing very vibrant growth, their TFP growth rate today is only 0.9%. And so in UP, which is the largest state in the country and the largest producer of many of the commodities, the TFP growth in UP is hardly 0.75%. So this low growth rate of TFP is unacceptable. And therefore the huge yield gaps, which exist at all the three levels of yield, that is the potential yield and the potential to the experimental field yields and the experimental demonstrations to the farmers' average yields, these three gaps are already very wide, and particularly the gap between the demonstrated yield at the farmers' field and the gap that the average yields are being obtained is the most crucial and high in terms of percentage and volume. Therefore, I think we have to give the highest priority to bridge the yield gap at that level as soon as possible. Simply bridging this gap will ensure all the desired levels of production that we are looking forward to obtain in this country up to year 2050. The state of poverty, hunger, and deprivation, the way it exists today in our country, is totally unfortunate and enigmatic, because we just said that we have increased our production by so and so many folds and so on. But nearly, as we all know, about 1/4 of the world's hungry, and that is nearly about 200 million people. 1/3 of the world's is stunted, and about 1/2 of the world's wasted children are our own people. This is intolerable, this deprivation and almost the epigenetic fixation of hunger is taking place in our country, which cannot be allowed to happen. Therefore, it's not only the production, it's not only the increase in the vertical yield, it is also the quality improvement. We must produce the right thing with right quality and try to combine and enrich the quality as much as possible. And this is very much possible, well demonstrated by many of the experiences, and we should be able to undertake this thing. India, on the other hand, besides this limitation, India is also deprived of doing better under the case of climate change, and it is projected that India will suffer the most in the world, and even today is suffering the most in the world because of the climate change, and about 25% of the reduction in productivity in this country is because of the climate change uncertainty. Therefore, we have to immediately intensify our efforts to fight the biotic and abiotic stresses, including, of course, the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic and so on. And we have to build back better to see that the climate smart agriculture with the triple wins of enhanced productivity, enhanced resilience, and better mitigation is allowed to operate. I think the mantra that we have to follow is today is more from less for more, because we are increasing in population, our demand is ever increasing because of economic growth as well, and so on. So a disaggregated and differentiated approach is required for irrigated areas, for rain-fed areas, for the salinity affected areas, for the crops like pulses, a different strategy, oil seeds, a different strategy, for the minor millets and nutri-cereals, different strategy. So a differentiated approach to bridge those yield gaps in all these commodities. One size does not fit all and has to be brought to play its important role. I will also like to mention that we have failed in liberating science to serve society. Very often, based on non-scientific grounds, we are stopped based on our products to reach the people whom, whom they are meant for or who need it the most. I'm so happy you all know the wonderful experience that the country had for BT cotton, being now number one in the whole world for production and second largest in the, and what happened to BT brinjal you all know. I must congratulate Philippines for accepting golden rice. Hopefully, this will open the door in India also, educate people also to see that the doors for these things can be opened after 20, 25 years of effort. This has happened. The herbicide tolerant soybean, of course, we are importing the GM oil and also the cake now. I recently in the last few weeks must have seen the newspapers also that soya cake is being imported from those countries which grow the GM soya. Now, if this is happening already, why should we not allow our own herbicide tolerant soybean production in a big way? Because soybean and mustard, these two commodities are the main drivers of all seed economy. And our average yield of soybean is 1.1 ton per hectare, while that in America is 3 tons and many other countries is 3 tons. And therefore, the work, I'm glad Rajiv Varsani, other colleagues, and Dr. Pentel are here. The work on the genomics, gene editing, and also to the new ways of doing business under these new total uh, uh, genome system has to be the very high priority, and our politicians should be sensitized to allow these proven technologies to reach the people whom it is meant for, to bridge the huge yield gaps that we are able to obtain, as we did in cotton. As we did in cotton, had there BT cotton not been there, we would have not doubled the cotton productivity. And this is a fact we should take lesson from the past. Not only yield, but quality, QPM maize, zinc, and iron-rich and fortified millets likewise will be more important, wheat and rice and so on and so forth. All these varieties in these commodities should be released, should become a rule in the country that all varieties to be released had to be fortified. Therefore, it is not only you are bridging the gap in production itself, but you are bridging the gap in quality also. So the nutritional as well as food security comprehensively are met together. Nutritional security is at the worst stage in this country. As I told you, that the wasted children in this country is half of the world percentage. Therefore, we have to move very quickly for the input use efficiency, which is declining. The soil health, nutrients, carbon economy has to be kept in mind. Please remember, the soil health is the mirror image of the human health. If soil is healthy, human is healthy, the one health concept of the world will happen, and only then it will be allowed to have a better soil health, a better human health, and so on. For all these considerations, I feel that people have to be sensitized and also be responsible, held responsible. What is happening in our input for plant health chemicals? 50% of the pesticides that we use are biopesticides that we use are spurious. Now, this is criminal, and we should be able to have a system that the responsibility is fixed on those who are producing, distributing, selling, and educating the farmer to use these spurious pesticides, hurting on all sides the system. The IPM, which was recommended earlier, has never really taken off. The precision agriculture that we need today with the artificial intelligence, digitalization, Internet of Things, sensors, satellites, drones, analytics, big data, and so on and so forth, all should be brought to bring together the blockchain technology, the conservation technology, mechanizations, and so on and so forth. Therefore, I will urge, if this has to happen, then the science social responsibility must marry the corporate social responsibility so that the public private sector work together to really move, take this movement forward. And likewise, it is not only the discovery through the various ways that I mentioned, but also the science of delivery and science of communication should be integrated together. If we can do this, only then we shall have a vibrant extension system, which will be also in line with the new education policy which the government of India had just introduced. And we should be able to have local youth who will be trained in the new agricultural education policy with multiple exit and entry, with provisions for degrees, diplomas, certificate, who will go back to Rave, which will have the extension agent responsibility, the youth for extension in groups from farmer to farmer, as well as to the group dynamics by using these youth for the development will be all a reality. Therefore, I will only say that please make it sure that your investment is targeted at the right place. It is not subsidy driven. It must be a quality investment. Mind you, our research and extension investment intensity is one of the lowest in the world. 0.4 is the intensity for research. 0.19 is the intensity for extension, which is one of the lowest against what is 3% in China and Australia. And my dear last word, I will say that please, for we should be able to make it sure that we don't only talk about when we link the farmer with the markets, it's not only the mere price policy, but it should be now the income policy for livelihood security of the poorest of the poor, and majority of them are poor farmers, and that can come by doubling the productivity, bridging the yield gaps, which will double their incomes, and farmer market linkages should always be able to promote this kind of initiative. Thank you, sir, for your time. I'm sorry if I have taken longer time, but I thought I would like to underline some of these important aspects. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Singh, for your very enlightened presentation in terms of addressing various important issues that need attention. And we appreciate your having joined us and also giving us the benefit of your thoughts on these subjects. I'm sure you will be with us whole day.
Sure,
So
I
look
am.
forward to your interaction. And again, we'll hear you in the concluding session. So I now have the privilege of requesting the new Director General of ICRISAT, whom possibly formally you are meeting today, might have met otherwise, Dr. Jacqueline Hughes. Jacqueline, now we look forward to your special remarks. And thank you for joining us and also co-sponsoring it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raj Paroda. Really appreciate your generous introduction. Professor Singh, Dr. Mohapatra, all the esteemed participants in this workshop, friends, colleagues, new friends, good morning to you all. Following on from the previous two discussions or papers, the challenges of global agriculture to feed and nourish an estimated 10 billion people by 2050, it's well documented. Among the myriad challenges that we all face, there is one primary constraint confronting nations, which is the large gap between actual and attainable yield of major food grain crops, the subject of this workshop. Bridging that yield gap is especially crucial if food and nutrition security can be achieved without encroaching on our fragile ecosystems or consuming more and more natural resources such as water. As further agricultural intensification is putting pressure on our soil fertility, and we're hearing that healthy soil is healthy people, is putting pressure on water and other inputs, the decrease in yield gaps can't be taken for granted. In fact, I put it to you that the reverse is probably true. A recent analysis of 2.5 million yield observations from National Agricultural Census records has documented widespread stagnation of yield increases across about 1/4 to 40% of global maize, wheat, rice, and soybean areas. They pointed out some hotspots of stagnation. France, 79% of harvested wheat area has stagnant yields. China, 79% of their harvested rice area, stagnant yields. And regretfully, in India, 70% of harvested rice area. Wheat and rice are crucial as they predominantly feed people. Maize and soybean feed people and also feed our livestock. I put it to you that stagnating food grain yields combined with a growing population is a prospect best avoided. We have research challenges. I'll put 2 of them to you for discussion later. Firstly, to articulate the definitions we're using and elucidate better techniques to measure and model yield at different levels, actual, attainable, and potential yield, at different scales in space, field, farm, region, global, and over time, the shorter and long-term yield. Then we need to identify the causes of gaps between yield levels. I would say that most of us are pretty sure of what they are, but we should not simply assume the causes. There has to be a solid scientific basis for understanding the yield gaps so that we can then address them properly, scientifically, and sustainably. Compared to these research challenges, the extension agencies and policymakers confront challenges related to the best management options to reduce the yield gaps where feasible, and then the policies to favor adoption of yield gap closing technologies. It's 2 big challenges there, because achieving yield gap closure is a complex task and involves trade-offs. Yield gaps are the cumulative result of decision-making by individual farmers who've weighed their perceived costs and benefits of changing their agricultural practices and found the prospect wanting. They find it unattractive or unattainable. In real production settings, we scientists would like to think we should go for maximum yield, but that's not always, or is rarely perhaps, the best strategy, as it may require cropping practices that are economically unsound or too risky in economic context, environmental context, or perhaps the farmer's own personal context. We know the agronomic approaches to closing yield gaps. Generally, they're well known, and we were hearing some of them earlier, the varieties, the agronomic, the inputs, and so on. But there's a variety of social, political, and economic factors that allow these yield gaps to persist. The conceptual simplicity of a yield gap is deceptive, because yield gaps are this result of multiple interacting biological, physical, and economic forces. And these farmers who we're talking about, who have the yield gap, are operating within geographic and financial constraints while individually seeking to make the best decisions possible in the context of their local situation, inputs, markets, risks, infrastructure, and policies. So for me, understanding the persistence of the yield gaps requires our attention to the incentives or disincentives and the constraints that challenge, let me call them the under-yielding farmers. Why are they doing it? Why are they seeing the solution as wanting in some form? The Indian Council of Agricultural Research, ICAR, and Dr. Mohapatra is with us and all his colleagues. ICAR has worked collaboratively with the international agricultural research organizations, including ICRISAT, over the last 4 to 5 decades to improve livelihoods and incomes of smallholder farmers, both women and men in India. And we're very proud of that collaboration relationship. We've worked together very well to develop hybrids with higher yields, better resistance to biotic and abiotic stressors, capable of good yields under adverse climate conditions, water regimes. And these have helped reduce the yield gap, particularly in our case of the dryland crops. 2 approaches that I'd like to share with you from ICRISAT, which have helped bridge the yield gap sustainably: a scientific approach to watershed management to increase water availability and reliability, and soil test-based application of fertilizers to meet the requirements of both the macro and micronutrients and to minimize wastage, runoff, and more importantly, cost. So these 2 approaches, other crop management practices, which we've been hearing about, pest and disease management, varieties, hybrids, they've improved yields and incomes and livelihoods of smallholder farmers across multiple states of India: Karnataka, Orissa, Maharashtra, the Bundelkhand region. They've helped improve these yield gaps, minimize them, but it's not enough. The gaps are still there. And apart from researchers, policymakers have a huge role to play in closing the yield gaps. If policy interventions can enable these under-yielding farmers to intensify production profitably, sustainably, without substantial additional risk, then closing yield gaps could go together with supporting livelihoods, ensuring food and nutrition security of some of our poorest populations. I call upon you, the group of experts in this workshop today, quantify the yield gaps, their magnitudes, causes, spatial distribution, and potential contribution towards meeting food and nutrition demand. And then explore from not only an agronomic perspective, but socioeconomic perspectives on how yield gaps might be closed and the potential consequences of those changes, the positive and possibly the negative for food, nutrition security, and the environment. If we can do that and identify the national patterns within India, within the states, this will create the foundation on which we can explore the possibilities and consequences of perhaps geographically targeted initiatives to enhance yield. So thank you for your attention. I hope we all have success in our deliberations today and in closing those yield gaps which we're targeting. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Paroda.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate your valuable comments and views relating to this important subject. We definitely agree that farmers are the key, as Dr. R.B. Singh also said, and smallholder farmers are 80% in our country, and they need to be incentivized for adopting good agronomic practices. And no doubt policies therefore are important, as you said, and partnership is also important between national and international centers, between public and private institutions. And I think there is tremendous scope in terms of bridging this biological, physical, and attainable and potential yields that you have highlighted. So we have to have a strategy. We need to move forward, and in that respect, appreciate your joining us. I hope you and your colleagues will be there. And we do see that the improved varieties, which are through marker-assisted selection, reach the end users as quickly as possible with whatever strategy that we have to adopt in partnership with the national system. So we look forward to that and appreciate your joining ICRISAT. I know you since long with the AVRDC, then ERI, and I think you are the person working all through your career in Asia. So we are happy that you are in India again and you
Thank
are with
you.
us. So with this, I have the privilege now to request Dr. Mahapatra. Dr. Mahapatra, we are really very pleased that you agreed. Rather, this was a joint initiative when we had discussed in the board of TAS. This particular subject was appreciated and you showed keen interest that there is definite need to revisit. Maybe we think that we are doing enough and not much is required to be done, but we definitely have a rather big agenda before us. And we look forward to hear from you in your inaugural address what kind of agenda you have in mind that we need to pursue further at national level and make a difference. Dr. Mahapatra,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Co-Chair, Dr. Raris Baroda, and Dr. R.B. Singh, and Dr. P.L. Gautam, and many other stalwarts. I find Dr. Gupta, Dr. Prabhu, and of course, Jackie Hughes from ICRISAT, and I think there are several others from CG System who are present today. And in fact, on my own personal behalf, let me first of all welcome all of you. As Dr. Prabhu said, that ICR has been part of the programs conducted by TAS. Very often we participate and partner. And when this was discussed, we readily agreed. In fact, this is one topic which is very, very crucial because very often, ICR is questioned about this particular aspect, the yield gaps. And we are often compared with the other nations, and obviously justifiably so, that we should be compared always, and that's essential also for us to benchmark. So we get compared, and sometimes these comparisons, are maybe ruthless, from several viewpoints. I'll not go into those details. And sometimes they are also very helpful, in planning, designing, redefining what we are doing. And more so in a country like India with so much of diversity in agroclimate, in socio-economy, and so on and so forth. There are various other factors as well. Given this variation that we have, probably yield gap, discussion on yield gap is very pertinent and relevant. And there are various reasons, Dr. Prodha and Dr. R.B. Singh and Jackie Hughes, they have all highlighted, various facets of yield gaps. I will, highlight few points, although it will be, some of them might be at the cost of repetition, and some of them could be because I feel they are important and need to be really addressed. Yield gaps, bridging the yield gaps to enhance food grain production. So focus is on food grain production, and certainly it's important. Of course, we have gone beyond 300 million tons mark in food grain production. So India has done a fairly good job, and more than 6 times increase as compared to 1950-51. And certainly credit goes to the policy making, because the policy certainly helps greatly. And as we know very well, as it happened in Green Revolution period. So policy planning and implementation of different government schemes, very crucial. But without technology, policy is barren. And technology, if we talk about Green Revolution technology, so obviously technology is the core of the requirement. So that is essential for bringing any changes in production and productivity. So in addition to the policy and the technology, we need someone to implement. So obviously, the farmers are the core of that, adopting, accepting what we are telling, and then demonstrating the best performance of the varieties, for instance, in their fields. So that has been very, very crucial for us to realize the yield gains and also realize, to a great extent, the potential of crop varieties in the past and also in recent years. So this is the kind of success we have. But certainly, this production that we have, more than 6 times increase in production, certainly has happened because of area expansion and also because of per se yield increase. The analysis what Dr. O.P. Yadav and myself and Dr. Dillon we did and published in Current Science, that reveals that how we have actually improved and increased in terms of yield in decadal fashion, and that has been actually very clearly depicted there, described there, that we have been improving continuously with regard to yield. And thanks to all the leaders who are here today and who are not here today, Dr. Shaminathan, of course, starting the whole, kind of revolution in the country. Of course, all those who have spearheaded the National Agriculture Research System, and those are the state level, university level, those who have worked, for example, at PAU, and obviously all have contributed to this situation. And we say today from shortage to surplus, and we have rather problems of plenty with regard to food grains. And the other day we were discussing, Honorable Minister of Textiles, very rightly pointed out that it doesn't mean that we should not increase our yield because you have too much produce, and we have problems of that, managing that. But it doesn't mean that we should not increase our yield. So very rightly so, we have to continue increasing yield, and that's the bare minimum essential requirement for enhancing yield. And yield gap exists. So that's another fact, that though we have increased and yield has also improved, our analysis says, there are yield gaps. Yield gaps not only in India, but at global level, yield gaps do exist. And global level analysis says in wheat about 36% yield gap, and rice around 35-36% yield gap, and in maize, for instance, about 50%. And if you see the region-wise, these yield gaps also varies. There's quite a bit of analysis available.
I think you are muted, sir. Please check. Dr. Mahapatra, please check. I think you are muted, sir.
Somebody should call him. He won't listen.
And so yield gap is a global phenomenon and not just an Indian phenomenon. And
muted, sir. Sound is not coming, please.
Sir, we are not able to hear you. Can you
I
kindly?
think, yeah.
In the literature, what we can, model as and expect based on model, what should be the yield, taking into account the physiology, taking into account how much of light is received, and what is the efficiency of that. And then in terms of the sinks and the capacity and the size and so on and so forth, and we can have the and modeling done, and then say what could be the yield, and what we realize in experimental situations, and what we get in maximum yield that we get in farmers field through demonstrations or otherwise the best farmers yields, and then the average yield. So if you take all this, the whole gamut of issues actually crop up. Of course, the previous speakers have put everything together, but a systematic analysis needs to be done, what we actually want to deal with and how we want to deal with. And in fact, these yield gaps that we analyze, based on which gap we are dealing with, our strategy would be actually different. And this different strategy we have to really work out. I believe there will be discussion on these different facets of yield gaps and how different yield gaps can be addressed by different means. And certainly, yield gaps need to be really addressed. And I will not go into those details, but some points I will highlight why it should be addressed. Dr. Arbit Singh said, population is increasing.
Can't hear you.
I think there is an internet connectivity problem.
If we can expand area, when it is required, we will certainly clean up forest, and we'll use wastelands and all those things we'll do. In fact, when we are pushed to do that, and certainly country would do that, or the whole world will do that. And maybe desert areas and wastelands, they're also converted into agriculture fields, and want to resort to all other alternatives which have emerged, whether it is hydroponics and so on and so forth in various crops, not necessarily in case of grain crop.
Some problem with the audio or his laptop itself.
Maybe connectivity problem.
This is the most important point that we should really understand, also discuss, that why it is important. We say biodiversity is shrinking. We say there is a degradation happening, and can we save lands for better restoration of the land? Can we save lands for biodiversity conservation? And can we save land for future? So that the land regenerates itself over a period of time, and allow it to regenerate, and then before we again come back to disturb it. So there are various reasons for saving land, and it's not.
I think there is again some problem with
regions, but that is another important point. So we need to really bridge yield gaps, and in the process we save land for other purposes, for diversification, for nature, for biodiversity conservation, for natural regeneration of the soils and land, and restoration purposes, and so on and so forth. So we need to really increase yield, and of course, we need to enhance yield to meet the
problem.
Problem with, I think there is some, again, problem with the system. We are not able to hear you, Dr. Mahapatra.
So that
Nothing comes out.
Maybe connectivity problem is.
And if you take Punjab yield, it is 5 tons per hectare, and just report is out. Dr. GP Singh will be here to describe this. And Chhattisgarh yield is 1.3 tons per hectare. Punjab yield is 5 tons per hectare. And there are varietal differences, but more important is what is that we are, practicing in terms of management, in terms of water, in terms of nutrient, in terms of other management, and what is that we are doing in Punjab. And what is the potential? The recent varieties, they have the potential of 7 to 8 tons. So Punjab is also not, realizing the full potential of these varieties. So already there is a 1 to 2 ton gap in Punjab itself, and then if you go to other states, that is 1.3 ton in Chhattisgarh, for instance. So the kind of gap that we see, that's what I mentioned, that what is that potential?
I think he's covering the speaker while changing the whatever aid he has got, the written one or what. Otherwise, why it should happen like that?
Something wrong going is there.
Something, yes, something is
We are not able to hear you, Dr.
Yeah.
Mahapatra. And kindly all others, please mute yourself. Dr. Mahapatra, you are not audible. Something is wrong with the system.
Clearly cannot hear us. Perhaps a message can go to his office.
Already informed, sir.
Okay. Dr. Mahapatra, we are not able to hear you, please.
Sir, I have told in his office, I think they are correct.
Thank you. Kindly see if it is muted.
I think some net problem is there. So
Yeah.
the TS has called the person looking after net. We sent message to office also and to sir also. Some network.
Thank you. Maybe Dr. Yadav, you could. Yeah.
उसमें कनेक्ट करो सीधा
अभी आ गया
ये प्रॉब्लम है आपका मैं
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I have been speaking, but I didn't know that it's not good.
Well, We heard you when you were talking about yield differences in Punjab and Chhattisgarh.
Yeah, so
Maybe.
I was telling that there is a yield difference, 5 tons in Punjab and then 1.3 tons in Chhattisgarh, and also our potential yield, and we have realized to the extent of 7 to 8 tons with the new variety DVW 187, for instance. And also the IRI varieties. So 7 to 8 tons versus 5 tons in Punjab and then 1.3 tons in Chhattisgarh. So obviously these gaps need to be really addressed in different manner. And recent analysis yesterday we did in the region, Maharashtra, for instance, and the cotton yield gap is, 150%. Our own FLD and as compared to what is being realized by the state. And, of course, we say that BT cotton has increased and doubled the yield, and that's true. But we are now less than 500 kg lint per hectare, and Punjab gives 700, 800 kg per hectare. And that's the average that we are getting, about 500 kg per lint per hectare. And Maharashtra is not even 300 kg per hectare. So if you see the same technology and doesn't really give us the returns that we expect from this. So it's not the technology per se, but the kind of management, kind of other things which are happening. And that's the serious challenge in this country. The most serious challenge is this, the kind of regional disparity. And we don't really often talk about this. And the policymakers actually need to be adequately informed about it, that why it is and why we have not been able to address these in the past 50, 60 years and keep blaming the scientists for what is being done. So I think this is one point which need to be really discussed and deliberated at length. And, we have the technology, same technology, but not realized, the potential is not realized, and variation is there. So that's a very important point. I believe it will be deliberated further. And I was trying to say that how do you really increase the yield potential further? I was trying to say that probably the technology as it has been evolving, that we should focus on gene editing technology. And it has a silver lining, and I believe we should be able to convince, and then we should be able to move faster than the GM and other technologies that we have. We have a GM-related technology that we have, modification that we have. So it's not to say that GM, should not be promoted, and we should not be doing that. And there are many other, advantages and so on and so forth. But I believe very strongly that with genome editing, we have demonstrated with a single gene, modification through gene editing, we have increased tiller number per, clump per plant to even 35, 36, 3 times increase in tiller number. And grain also, it's a huge difference. I will not go into those different details. So there are experimental examples available with us in India, and that says that by tinkering with single genes, and we can have huge jumps in yield. And that's what is very, very important to actually take forward. And how do we really do this? And I propose, and Dr. Pentel is there, I propose that there has to be a mega program, maybe 1,000 crore program, 1,000 crore rupees program on genome editing. And for past 5 years, I have been actually insisting on this, and requesting DBT also to initiate, but that has not really happened. So we are losing out. I believe we will also lose out in case of gene editing, and our policy also is being deliberated at this point in time. So there is plenty of opportunity, and we have to understand pathways, we have to understand genes, the quantitative trait loci. What is observed by way of cloning? That loss of gene function, gain of trait, majority of QTLs which have been cloned, they indicate this. What does it reveal? It reveals the evolution, how it is happening. Evolution happening by way of loss of gene function, and by way of by that there are tremendous gains in traits. And if we take this lesson forward, and by way of gene editing, try to manipulate not only the coding sequences, but the more importantly, the regulatory sequences, I believe we would be doing a fantastic job in days to come. But I must also say that it's not just genes, but the epigenes. And today there are papers now coming that how epigenetic manipulations, modifications can bring revolutions in future. We have been talking about plasticities and all that, adaptability and all that, domestications and all those things. And what really happens during these processes, we don't really understand most of it. And neither there is actually any work happening elaborately in this country, that unless we deal with the epigenetic modifications on how they're happening, we'll not be able to really have those kind of gains, as we expect. So genetic modifications as well as epigenetic modifications would be very crucial as we go along. And different environments, why Chhattisgarh environment doesn't give, and what is that epigenetic modification we need to do by providing environment and providing other signaling through chemicals or otherwise, and that would be able to really deliver on the targets that we have. So there are various issues to that, the agronomic management and addressing epigenetic issues. It's a complex area to deal with, and I believe it would be deliberated. So germplasm use for this, I do not know, less than 5% of our germplasm has been used. So how do we really use this to have yield gains in future? So let me not really elaborate on each one of those. I have spoken enough. I lost maybe 5 minutes by way of disconnection. So I am sorry for that. So there are various facets. So I stop here. There will be other experts to really bring this, and I would like to be advised and guided by what we should really do and to address yield gaps in this country. And what kind of policy, Dr. Jackie Hughes did mention, what kind of policy we need to bring in to address yield gaps in this country. And just by addressing management gaps, and we can have a huge jump in our productivity, as we see in this country. As I said, cotton productivity in Maharashtra, if we can double that, we'll have a huge, the maximum area is in Maharashtra. So if we have to be a huge gap. So with this, thank you very much, sir, for not only thinking about it, but also inviting all the experts and myself to be part of this important program. And I'm sure, it will be equally, enriching, and it would be a big guiding force for us, as you have done in the past. Your thought process and your systematic way of dealing with problems would help us also to build future programs for India. And India must succeed, and we must work together to succeed. And our farmers also must get benefit out of the potential which is already there in our varieties. So thank you very much, sir, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahapatra. We appreciate your having reaffirmed the importance of this particular subject for deliberation and to come out with a roadmap. I'm sure after the detailed deliberations that we will follow, we will have a clear roadmap, crop-wise, region-wise, and also in terms of genetic potential-wise. And what we need now is to put our all actions together, have, and no doubt one strategy would not fit all. So it has to be crop specific, region specific, and we have to also look at the constraints in the context of whether it is irrigated cotton or it is rain-fed cotton, and or it is rain-fed crop, and otherwise the available potential of that. And many a times it is argued, why do we grow that particular crop which is not economically viable? And what are the other options in that context? And what could be the possible cropping systems that can be more sustainable? Like in the US, the soybean and maize rotation for the years now. 1 year it is soybean grown, the next year it is only corn grown. And that's the most sustainable using the conservation agriculture practices. And you and earlier speakers also highlighted that we need to grow more from less. and improve efficiency and ensure that farmers get more income. And income by increasing productivity and reducing cost on inputs. That means by bringing in efficiency. And already many of the inputs are being used. But like in case of nitrogen use, our efficiency is only 30%. Those can be improved significantly. But what we need now is an effort, a joint effort, and a strategy, and maybe revisiting this national mission on food security and proper allocation of resources, and then having it monitored more effectively, that you don't ask for additional funds. And you very rightly again indicated that you definitely need to have aggressive approach for genetic enhancement using the new techniques and tools that are available, whether it is CRISPR-Cas or whether we go for the genetically modified food crops. And it seems there are opportunities. And the case for corn and be very strong. Philippines has already adopted the GM rice for their vitamin A deficient areas. So there are options available. We would need policy support, policy reorientation, as was also highlighted by Jackie before, and by Dr. R.B. Singh, relating to less, produce more for more. And in agriculture, we have been doing that actually. From few seeds with little inputs, we have been producing many-fold. And that's how we have fed our people and our population. And this is to be again emphasized upon. And your suggestion for bridging vertical gap is important, and also suggestion for bridging horizontal gap between region to region, eco-region to eco-region is another important point. I hope all our speakers who are to follow, they have already been requested to highlight this kind of roadmap. We don't have to do more analysis in terms of what has been achieved, that is there. But how can we reach the end user with this technology for the greater benefit and to the farmers as well as to the nation. And hopefully there would be initiatives of the kind by clearance of the guidelines for genome editing, which are already there, which we debated, and more allocation of resources and emphasis on that kind of research in various institutions, besides of course at TICRISAT, which is a leading institution already. We will be able to achieve much more in the years to come. So with this, Dr. Mahapatra, I would welcome if you have time to continue whenever you like during the day. We would have liked to have it a shorter workshop, and we don't call it a seminar or a conference. It is a workshop. We have to work to come out with a roadmap. That's why this is clearly stated. And we want a strategy, and a strategy cannot be uniform. And in that context, I'm sure all will give their input, and maybe you could join us back when we conclude at the end. We will appreciate if there is time.
Sir, if I find time, I'll come back, sir.
Please, please,
Sir.
we will appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
So with this, thank you.
I may be pardoned, sir. I'll take leave, sir. There is another meeting.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, sir.
Pressure on your time.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar.
We appreciate maybe also the participation of Jackie, and no doubt my elder brother and friend philosopher Dr. R.B. Singh, he's always there, and he will be with us continuing. So I don't have to thank him right now, but I appreciate for joining this inaugural session. So with this, thank you, and we conclude with the inaugural session and pass on the baton to equally very experienced and uh, eminent colleagues who have played very important role in crop improvement, particularly Dr. P.L. Gautam, an eminent wheat breeder, and vice chancellors, and also the chairman of the two authorities. I think singular distinction he has for that, and associated with him, Dr. T.R. Sharma, who is currently looking after the crop science division. Very important responsibility. And I would now request both of them to co-chair and continue with this session. I think we have not taken more time, maybe 15 minutes, but we will continue now with the next session. And with this, we close our inaugural session. Thank you, and thank you for all to participate. I'm happy that now we have 108 participants. Maybe there may be more still, and that shows, and many leaders who had been in crop improvement work and with the national policy related issues are all participating. Nothing can be more satisfactory than that to go ahead with this workshop on bridging the yield gaps, which we certainly must look at and try to be more realistic, no doubt, in terms of what is our future roadmap. So Professor Gautam and Dr. T.R. Sharma, I hope you are there. Kindly,
Yes, sir, we are here.
kindly go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir, we are here.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Paroda, for your kind words. I really welcome Dr. R.B. Singh, DG of ICRISAT, and all very eminent people who are present in this particular event. Well, the inaugural session had been quite educative, and we had advantage of listening to the part of job has already been done, and we are grateful to all the speakers in the inaugural session. Well, we have a little constraint of time, so we will be brief in making our comments here. And the job has been made very easy, that without going into the historical perspectives, which may be necessary at certain stage, but we would like to really have the presentations focused on the theme. The theme is bridging the yield gap. And what are the strategies? Go beyond the strategies which we are being adopted, and what is the differentiated strategy which you have in your mind? It will be interesting to hear full presentation on individual crops, but I know that we will have time constraint, and we should not delay the further sessions. So though the time given to every speaker is 20 minutes, I'll try that or I'll request them to complete it within 15 minutes so that there is a time for discussion, and we leave the session or conclude the session in time. I have also the presence of Dr. T.R. Sharma, and request him for brief remarks, and then we will have the presentation from different speakers. Dr. T.R. Sharma, who is the DDG of Crop Science presently, and who has to really implement most of these recommendations which we are going to make in this workshop. Dr. Sharma.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning to all. Honorable Dr. R.S. Paroda, Dr. R.B. Singh, Dr. P.L. Gautam, and distinguished vice chancellors and directors of different institutes. We have DG ICRISAT with us. I welcome you all for this particular discussion, or rightly said by Dr. Paroda, a workshop where we have to make a roadmap, action point, and probably in some action points, we have to list timelines. So it's all initiative of Dr. R.S. Paroda. We discussed around 3 months back when he was in US that we should work on this particular topic. And then same day we started working on arrangement of this particular workshop. And I'm really happy that today we could be able to organize it. In the morning session, we had very interesting presentation by all the stalwarts, and most of the points they have already discussed. And as said by the chair, Dr. P.L. Gautam, we have now very specific presentations, and naturally we need a very clear roadmap in these 5 crops which we are going to discuss today. And maybe in the afternoon session, we have a panel discussion. So without wasting much time now, I will again request Dr. P.L. Gautam to kindly start the session, and I would be along with him. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And as the list is already there, you know the program. We will have the first presentation on rice, a very important crop for the country. And we have Dr. Dipankar Methi, who is the director of CRRI. And he has long experience in working in rice. And I look forward that he puts the required strategy in place here, and which will be very helpful in making some very solid recommendation to this important crop of the country. Dr. Methi, please.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are clear. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So very good morning to one and all. Honorable Chairman, TAS, Dr. R.S. Paroda, respected Professor R.B. Singh, former President, NAS, Honorable Secretary DR and DG ICR, Dr. T. Mahapatra, esteemed DG ECRISAT, Dr. Jacqueline, Honorable Chair of this technical session, Professor P.L. Gautam, and former Chairman TPB FRA, and Co-Chairman Dr. T.R. Sharma, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great privilege to have the opportunity to share my views on strategy for bringing yield gaps in rice. I'll be dealing with the main points like India's global stand in terms of hunger index, and for addressing that, ICR's vision, India's rice scenario, including yield gaps, India's rice farming challenges and constraints which need to be addressed, and the good agricultural practices, I will call it GAP in my presentation, to address the challenges in terms of promotional and research issues. And finally, I will conclude. So if we look at the hunger index globally, we find that over the years, India is slipping big. And for that, ICR's vision by 2030 is to build a green agriculture by increasing poverty by 40%, increasing productivity by 40%, reduce poverty by 30%, increasing profitability by 200%, and reducing pollution and emission by 20%. So if we talk about rice, it is often termed as the golden cereals because it is the most world's important food crop, been grown about 7,000 years back, since 7,000 years. And it is grown in almost all the ecologies, including waterlogged condition where no other crops can be grown. So at any point of time, it is grown somewhere in India. And 90% of global rice is produced and consumed in Asia. Also, it has been expanded to Africa and Latin America nowadays. And for India, Indians, rice is life, their culture and heritage. So if we look at the rice scenario, we produced about 116.6 million tons of rice and 177.8 million of paddy in the last year, feeding about 65% of the population and harvested from about 22% of cropland, grown by about 56% of the farmers, fetching annual value of 17% of the total crop value, supporting livelihood to about 40% poor, though it receives about 29% of total irrigation water, consumes about 37% of fertilizer, and emits about 18% of total methane emission. So if we look at if we consider the rice development goals, it addresses all the sustainable development goals. So if you see the area, despite no much increase, we have increased our production through increasing yields through the technologies. So if you look at the scenario, scenario of growth rate, it initially increased during 50 to 60 with the advent of the dwarf gene, and then it came to plateau, and again it increased during 80 to 90 with the advent of new genes, and again it came to plateau and now increasing with the advent of multi-stress tolerant genes incorporated in the varieties. So projected demand by 2030 is about 140 million tons, by 2040 170, and by 2050 is 200 million tons, despite higher frequency of intensity of climate extremes. And as we find in our India, the yield gaps are more particularly in the rain-fed areas, in rain-fed ecologies like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Odisha. And the yield gaps ranges between 45 to 80%. And we can characterize the constraints to 10 points. I will be presenting in one by one in the next few slides. So first is the small and marginal farmers with poor resources to use optimum recommendations which is mostly in eastern states. For this, we need to first bring the farmers under cooperative umbrella, and for which Government of India has already installed a central scheme targeting about 10,000 FPOs to be formed. Popularization of small implements, and most important is we need to attract the rural youths towards agri entrepreneurship, including service centers for agri appliances in local areas. As for example, so we can see in remote villages, the farmers can afford to purchase implements like tractors, power tillers with the help of subsidies. But in sometimes for very minor repairs, they need to go to distant cities, and that thereby they lose time, they lose timely operations in field. So if there are entrepreneurs which can make those repairs, local minor repairs in the villages, that will be very helpful. So next is promoting farming system models, which has been developed for several farming sectors like small, medium, and large farmers, cooperative group marketing and produce, custom hiring for farm implements by developing entrepreneurship, particularly attracting rural youths, value addition at local level, and maximize profits. Number two constraints is erratic rainfall and poor soils, which is mostly concentrated in Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Eastern UP, for which the suitable varieties for different ecologies have already been evolved, which can be implemented, which will get brought to the farmers very robustly. And also in those ecologies, the low input is another input, less input efficiency, use efficiency is another criteria. So for those, there are varieties which can be implemented. We should also emphasize on DSR as much as possible in niche areas for uplands and shallow medium lands, both dry and wet DSR. Also, application of organic fertilizers we should enhance in combination with inorganic fertilizers, and also you need to reschedule for particular stresses. For example, under moisture stress, application of higher phosphorus with iron in the form of FeSO4 and silicon in SiO2. So these are the few points we can implement robustly, and also use of customized leaf color charts to enhance nitrogen use efficiency. Low cost implements which are already there, which should be implemented very robustly, and water saving technologies like alternate wetting and drying, aerobic rice, SRI, etc. So these are the schematic drawing of how we can mechanize our seed to seed process, and also from harvest to plate. Now coming to another constraint is flash flood and waterlogging to poor drainage, mostly concentrated in Assam, West Bengal, North Bihar, and Eastern UPs. For this, the flash flood ecology and waterlogging varieties are there, suitable varieties are there, and on those ecologies, there are most often the multiple biotic and abiotic stresses often comes. and which are being accentuated by the abiotic stresses, So multi-stress tolerants are available with biotic and abiotic combinations. Also, we need to promote the climate resilient production technology, including crop management, which includes modifying crop management and water management practices. Sometimes require rescheduling of fertilizer application. For example, under post-emergence, we need to have post-submergence in application after 48 hours of desubmergence, and vessel application to the tune of additional 20% under anticipated flood situation. Then adoption of resource conservation technologies, crop diversification, and improved IPM technologies. Then harnessing and indigenous technology knowledge of farmers also. Under policy management, making available the timely weather-based advisories to make the farmers ready, and crop insurances. Next is use of local varieties in mostly in eastern states. And we need to improve the seed replacement with better coordination with state departments, National Seed Corporation, research institutes, and particularly the hybrids, and for which the PPP mode is very important. And we need to encourage seed village concepts. One of the concepts that is 4S for us, sustainable seed system for rice, which has been developed by NRI and is ready for extrapolation in other parts of the country. And mass media campaign for greater awareness among the farmers regarding hybrids and high-yielding varieties. So these are some high-yielding varieties. Next is low and imbalanced use of fertilizers, mostly in the northeastern and eastern states, for which CLCC-based application is required to be made use, and use of rice and exports. I'm coming to that in next few slides. Then the extension strategies like print distribution and education, educate the farmers about LCC technology, and recommended our soil health-based card-based use of fertilizers. Next is covering 100% farmers under soil health card. Next constant is delayed and prolonged transplanting due to delayed monsoon and post-early flood. For suitable varieties for delayed monsoon, that is early deviation varieties like CR Dhan 101 and 102 are available. And for post-monsoon flooding, there are varieties available for which the aged seedlings can also be used. And to address this situation, the staggered community seedbed raising is another issue. Coming to the poor adoption and production technology, mostly in uplands and lowlands, the extension strategies to be improvised for capacity building of KVKs, state extension functionaries, through training, online information dissemination through rice knowledge management portal, particularly in Eastern India, and capacity building for use of and promotion of rice apps like rice N export, rice export, and paddy seed exports. Another constraint is saline and alkaline ecology. For saline ecology, varieties are available, and varieties for alkaline ecology are also available, developed from CSRI kernel. And for the same ecology, management strategies need to be in place, like proper application of gypsum. And in case of gypsum, the rate can be reduced to half in case of salt-tolerant varieties use and FYM use. The sodic salts can be brought back into cultivation by use of bioreclamation using grasses like salt-tolerant grasses for growing about 7 to 8 years. And also secondary salination can be reclaimed by appropriate use of subsurface and surface drainage. Another problem is labor problem in northern states and other areas, which is acute in northern states and prevalent in other states too. For this, the technological gaps, improved practices is to be suitable farm implements. And for that, the extension strategies like formation of groups, cooperatives, and developing community level entrepreneurship in purchasing and using farm implements on custom hiring basis that I also discussed earlier. And finally, we need to manage the straw also, because the time gap between rice and the rabi crop is very less. So for that, NRI also is active and also characterize the rice varieties for for the different use of straw for biochar production, bioethanol, mushroom production. And also there are decomposers available for in situ decomposition, for which the more efficient so far is push decomposer, which takes about 28 to 30 days to decompose. But for the farmers, the requirement is a bit less, that is 2 weeks almost. But there should be a compromise, because too fast a decomposer would promote carbon imbalance in soil also. And also large scale ex situ microbial mediated decomposition composting methods are also standardized. And also we can look at the straw feed blocks with value added could be prepared and transported to areas with less availability of green fodder. So another point our Honorable DG also mentioned, and how we can look at the eco-friendly farming, that is ecoregion based rice farming. Let us look at it. I mean, the ecoregions, the best ecoregions of our country under irrigated 60%, rainfed is 40%. And our average yield is about 3 to 4 ton per hectare. Now, let us see what is the best ecoregion for rice farming. The ecology with adequate rainfall, that is more than 1,000 millimeter rainfall, with fertile soil, clay more than 25%, and congenital temperature average less than 27 degrees centigrade. So if we can grow rice only in these suitable ecoregions, can these suitable ecoregions produce enough rice to meet the demand? Let us see. Now, our demand for rice by 2030 is 180 million tons. Current average productivity is 3.9 million tons per hectare, and current area is 43.5 million hectare. So if we can increase this 3.9 ton to 4.5 ton per hectare, our area required will be 40 million hectare. And if we can increase by to the tune of 5 ton per hectare, our area required will be 36 million hectare to achieve this 180 million ton target. So about 7 million ton unfavorable rice area can be shifted to alternatives like oil seeds and horticulture. So now I will discuss in a couple of slides what are the research projections in terms of varietal improvement and management. So for varietal improvement, we need to have intensive use of modern tools and technologies like biotechnological techniques like marker-assisted selection, transgenic, CRISPR-Cas9, and also our DG mentioned about epigenetic modifications. And then these approaches involving genetic modifications, particularly the traits, particularly those traits for which the resistance are not available in the cultivated species. Then empirical breeding strategies have to be integrated with genomic assisted breeding to have more precise and higher genetic gain. Use of double haploid technologies as a part of breeding tools to shorten the breeding cycle, and also the androgenic protocol for hybrid production. Then we need to develop super rice having more than 10 ton per hectare. A few are already in place like CR 307. And multiple stress tolerant varieties specific to each ecology, because each ecology they need to have a set of different resistance for the stresses. Improvement of short aromatic local land races and registration of land races for their branding so that the farmers can get the real price. Biofortified varieties with high yield and good quality. And further, the hybrid rice for rain-fed ecology and DSR, new generation rice, new plant type, and genetically engineered and transgenic rice are the additional possibilities. Then also we can look at the more efficient photosynthesis in rice, like cloning and transformation of rice for efficiency for photosynthetic pathway. And in NRI, we developed and characterized the rice transgenic lines over expressing 4 genes from sorghum and Ceteria, and minimizing CO2 loss through photorespiration. Coming to the crop management research projections, low improvement implements with more energy efficiency and high precision. Water saving technologies, particularly micro irrigation for niche areas, end-use efficient technology like nanotechnology, fine-tuning precision farming modules, reforming and restructuring resource conservation technology, fine-tuning multifunctional microbial technology products. So finally, I'll conclude with what are the drivers for rice research and development we should look at. Number one is increasing income, yield stagnation, water shortage, climate change, malnutrition, environmental pollution, value addition and value chain, discovery to delivery, digital agriculture, and capacity building. So that's all in brief. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mehti, for the presentation. You will have a little time to really come forward with the solid recommendations on the areas which were indicated, the gaps on the technology front, gap on the management front, gaps which are in the policy front, because they will be very helpful for us to, like you indicated, one policy intervention, crop insurance. This is now how effective it is. Crop insurance is already there. Now indicate those things. You indicated that some of the area can be diverted to other crops. Is it realistic? Should we divert it or not? Now, these are, now you have to give a roadmap. And they have not to be in the terms of the general routine scientific presentation. You'll appreciate that it has to be given in the recommendations in the format in which it is required to be presented to the different users. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, and look forward for synthesis of the ideas on the lines which I have just mentioned to you.
Okay, sir.
Please prepare it so that in the discussion time you are available to present that.
Okay,
thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you, sir.
We have next presentation by Dr. G.P. Singh, who is the director of Institute of Wheat and Barley Research based in Karnal. Dr. G.P. Singh, you are here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, please start your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Most respected Professor R.S. Paroda Sahab, Professor R.B. Singh Sahab, and the chair of the session, Professor P.L. Gautam Sahab, and Dr. P.R. Sharma, and most distinguished colleagues who are present here. In brief, I'll be presenting the strategy to build, bridge the yield gap in wheat. Before that, the growth of wheat since the Green Revolution and post-Green Revolution has been outstanding. And for the last 5 years, we had been seeing record production of wheat continuously in a row. And this is only happened because of the deployment of the superior wheat varieties, bridging yield information gaps, strengthening seed value chain, and supportive government policies and farmer support. And we also look forward to go much beyond this by development of super varieties which are coming in the pipeline, like DBW 303, DBW 187, and so on and so forth. Before actual presentation starts, sir, I'll just remind about the historical genetic gains which wheat has witnessed, and starting from C306 in 1965 onwards, post-Green Revolution, until update with the advent of the varieties like DBW 187 and 303, we had been continuously recorded 1.21% annual genetic gain. And when we see the trend of wheat production in South Asian countries, it's very clear that India has a production increase from 86.53 million tons to 109.52 million tons from 2015 to 2021, and this is by way far ahead as compared to the neighboring countries. And India is maintaining an average of 4.03% growth in the last 5 years, whereas Nepal has recorded 3% and Bangladesh is having a minus growth as far as wheat production is concerned. Now, when we talk of bridging yield gaps, and we have to look where these gaps are lying in different states, in different agroclimatic zones. And when we see this, we find that Assam, Bihar, Gujarat, and Jharkhand, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh are some of the states where large gaps are existing. Whereas in Punjab, in Haryana, gaps are existing, but these gaps are not that much as compared to the other states. And overall, when we see on an agroclimatic zone basis, in Northern Hill Zone, the gap is 23%, whereas in Northeastern Plains Zone, it is 21%. And in Northwestern Indo-Gangetic Plains, it is 8%. In the Central and Peninsular India, it is ranging from 10% to 15%. And therefore, this naturally draws our attention to focus on the Eastern India. And that's how the government is planning to have and is executing a policy of bringing green revolution to Eastern India. Now, when we see the productivity level of wheat in different states and vis-a-vis in the national productivity, which is roughly 3.5 tons per 3.5 tons, 4 of the states, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana, and Punjab, for the first time recorded more than the national average. Particularly Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh for the first time are above national average this year. Whereas some of the states like Gujarat and Uttarakhand, West Bengal are approaching very fast towards the national average of the productivity of wheat in India. But we have to mind the fact that the national productivity is also going up. So these states have to match the progress of the national productivity if they want to achieve the level of production. There are basically 6-7 states which are playing major role in the production, and Bihar, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, Rajasthan. And here I am depicting the quinquennial yield trends of major wheat. Some of the states are hovering to the production level of 5 tons, like Haryana and Punjab, whereas Madhya Pradesh and other states are catching with them. But recently there is a downfall in the production and productivity from Madhya Pradesh. Now, when we talk of wheat improvement strategies and bringing bridging the yield gaps, I think the first attempt, if we want to bridge these pre-breeding initiatives, which our institution has been doing so, and in the next plan, we are mainly focusing on breaking yield barriers, particularly with the utilization of the conventional and the modern tools, and the integration with durable resistance to different pests and diseases, and also combining the abiotic stress tolerance. And thereby we can sustain wheat productivity gain through breeding. And we also focusing on increasing input use efficiency, sustainable wheat-based system, improving livelihood and safeguarding the environment, and seed delivery system, which I also mentioned in the earlier slides. And thereby we can double the income of the farmers by 2022 or in succeeding years. And capacity building has been one of the major focus area for us during last 5 years or so. And now, as it was indicated that Eastern India is the one, and the last QRT of the All India Institute, All India Coordinated Products on Wheat and Barley, and also on IIWBR, was headed by none other than Professor R.B. Singh Saab. And in his report, it is clearly mentioned that if we want to increase productivity of India in terms of wheat, we have to focus on Eastern India. And therefore, our efforts are on to do these efforts in Eastern India, whereas constraints are late planting of wheat, then weed competition, low fertility, soil degradation, and also seed quality is one of the major issues in Eastern India, and the choice of the cultivars, because most of the cultivars which have been recently developed are not being able to reach to the farmers of the Eastern India. And seed being a critical component, we had been doing this enhancing varietal replacement rate. And I would like to tell you, sir, that wheat is one crop where we experience highest varietal replacement rate. And we are also promoting seed village concept, grassroots level, and proactive partnership with the Department of Agriculture and the State Department of Agriculture. One example I would like to quote here is, as far as Eastern India is concerned, is that this is one variety which was developed in 2020. Now this is the top intended, #1 intended variety for the year 2022. A success story of this farmer from Gorakhpur district in Uttar Pradesh, Eastern Uttar Pradesh, was displayed on the website of ICR, where she harvested 8 ton yield. Not only this is a very high yielding variety, but top breeder seed intended variety, but this is also resistant to several diseases, including weed blast, and this is also catering to the need of the biofortification, as it has very high iron content. So mass dissemination of potential technologies, including these varieties, through strengthening of institutional linkage between ICR, SAU to bridge the yield gap between the actual and the potential yields. This is our main area of focus. And for this, we have developed a model for seed production, distribution, and promotion through private-public partnership, wherein we identify varieties and then locations. We identify the potential location and stakeholders, and then subsequently to the release, we go for mass seed propagation through public-private partnership. And as you can see, that within 1 year, this has become the highest intended variety. And this may lead to a quantum jump in wheat production. Also, sir, we are opting for seed portals. Last year during the COVID, we distributed our entire seed to the farming community through this portal. ICR has also made it necessary for all the crop commodities to have this kind of portal, so that the varieties can be distributed to the farmers. Now, one point I would like to suggest as a roadmap is the strengthening of the public-private partnership for faster technology dissemination and outreach. And for this, we had been utilizing the occasion for organizing on-the-spot symposium workshop in Sirsa, in Haryana, and several other places in Haryana, in Punjab, in Rajasthan, and also in nearby communities, localities in Haryana. We have also been doing traveling seminars for variety awareness, which is probably one of the unique and incomparable effort as it has been made. So you can see here that we go to the farmers field and then organize a roving seminar and then do the necessary extension activities. As far as the improvement of wheat is concerned, as you know that abiotic stresses are very, very important. And for water use efficiency, our efforts are on. And then we have identified the area where water is depleted. And then we are doing these activities through scientific efforts. And we have identified several of the varieties which have high water use efficiency. And we are doing including these lines into the hybridization program for development of new lines. Similarly, for heat also, we have identified several of the lines which can easily go along and lead to the development of varieties. And we have established the fact that there is a co-movement between heat and drought in stress intensity. So even if you develop varieties for heat tolerance, for one abiotic stress, it is having a better drought or abiotic stress tolerance for other character also. Same way, we are also using this as for nitrogen use efficiency. We have identified several of the genetic stocks which are there in the pipeline. We have done integration of these traits into several of the agronomic background, and they will definitely be coming in the coming time. For one of the important publications from the Jirkas group led by Dr. Subbarao et al. In 2021 appeared in PNS. Wherein he has clearly stated that by introduction of the biological nitrification inhibition, we can definitely go on saving large amount of nitrogenous fertilizers, and also we can cut upon the carbon this thing. And the ICR, BISA, and Jirkas, including CIMIT, have entered into a project which will shortly be coming, wherein Jirkas has developed lines in the background of Monal, a very important line from CIMIT, which can give 8 ton yield on 50% nitrogen or 25% nitrogen application, and this will lead to a sort of a revolution in the field of nitrogen application. Same way, we are focusing on resource use efficiency through physiological breeding, increasing photosynthetic capacity, optimizing partitioning to grain yield while maintaining lodging tolerance, and breeding to accumulate yield potential traits. And this we are doing through physiological tool, and we are utilizing genetic resources to explore wheat collection, alien species for desired traits. And naturally, the pre-breeding activities are playing a very important role in this. Same way, sir, one study was done wherein we studied the breed HD2967 of a landmark variety for different physiological traits, and we found that almost all the physiological parameters were enhanced in this variety. So physiological trait-based breeding program can be one of the most important activity during the coming time to increase the efficiency of the plant and leading to a new level of yield. Subsequent to wheat genome sequence, we had been doing high throughput phenotyping, precision phenotyping, and also enriching the genomic resources through modern technologies, as it was mentioned in the morning session, and revisiting the genetic resources. And we have utilized several of the land races, genetic stocks, and elite lines for improvement of biotic and abiotic stresses. And as you can see, that through speed breeding in genomic selection, we have found that some of the material developed recently have a very high efficiency based on their best GBV genotype for grain yield. So you can see DBW187 figuring among the top varieties, which has a high genetic gain in comparison to the other varieties. One of the innovative methods of improving abiotic stress tolerance have been through MARS, the molecular assisted recurrent selection, and several of the lines, favorable alleles can be accumulated in one background, and this has led to development of many lines which will be coming in coming time, which have a large number of QTLs for different abiotic stress tolerance. For the development of any technology, precision phenotyping is one of the most important factors. And we have developed a good facility at IIWBR, wherein hundreds of yield QTLs has been identified in genetic background of wheat, and many superior QTLs have been identified because of this kind of phenotyping facilities. And once we do this, we also have to look back to the local land races to increase the diversity for yield. We have seen through the SNP genotyping that the exotic collection and the local collections are absolutely different, and therefore they can be utilized for improvement of different traits. Now, a state-of-art infrastructure facility for rapid genetic gain has been proposed in the next SFC through high throughput phenotyping and genotyping through genome editing and Center of Excellence state-of-art speed breeding facility. CIMIT is already on the way of developing this next generation information center, because we have large amount of data and these data is to be analyzed in such a way that we can come to some conclusive information. And we also plan to develop seed tracker and ICT enabled agro services. As far as transfer of technologies, role of demonstration is very important in bridging the yield gap and information gap. And this can be done by increasing wheat yield across the zone, capable of realizing the potentials of new genotype, because many of the farmers are not at all aware about the new genotypes which have been developed recently. And this is also capable of replacing the old varieties. And this has potential to educate the farmers about the relative advantage of the new technologies over the older ones, and can propagate the concept of own farm, own seed through skill upgradation. We also intend to educate other farmers about the benefits of the new technologies like zero tillage, which can yield 4 to 5% more with cost saving of 4,000 to 5,000 per hectare. And through input support, small and marginal farmers were more benefited. So this is all dependent on the decision support system. We can develop a system where the farmers can take on their own decision based on their requirement. So with this, I thank you very much, sir, for your kind attention and giving me this opportunity to present before the August gathering. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. GP Singh, for a wonderful presentation. And wheat is a very important crop, and a lot of work has been done by you and your predecessors. And we have a very effective All India Coordinated Research Project in almost all the crops, most of the major crops. You have indicated that what are the areas which need to be taken note of, but a concise view of everything needs to be in form of recommendation. Like in the genetic front, you indicated that these are the areas where work needs to be done. seed front, you indicated that one of the major limitation in the eastern part of the country is the non-availability of seed. Now, how to bridge that? Now, this becomes a gap which needs to be filled in, a very clear-cut gap which you have indicated. And similarly, you have indicated demonstration. People don't have information about the new practices, new varieties, and so on. This is another area which you have highlighted. And like that, if you can pick up the presentations made in the inaugural session, I think you'll be in a position to really synthesize the recommendations in the policy front, in the genetic level, in the agronomic side, in the ecology side, and resource use efficiency, and so on. You have given them, they are little scattered, and it will be good for us that in the discussion time, you make a very brief, candid presentation or present your views so that they can lead to formulation of very effective recommendation. Thank you very much. It was very useful presentation. Thank you. The next presentation is on the maize, and we have Director of the Maize Research Institute, Sanjay Rakshit, who will make the presentation. I'll suggest him, if he can do it, to take care of those points which are required to be reflected in the roadmap, in the strategy map. Hopefully, Rakshit is there.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. And after you, the
Hello.
next, yes, Rakshit, you are there.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. You can now make your presentation. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes. You are audible.
Audible.
Yes.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you
Yes,
are audible.
Rakshit, you are audible.
Dr. Sujay, you are audible, but your slides are not visible. Share
Am I
your
audible,
slides.
sir?
Share your slides.
Security alert.
No.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead. Again, your slides are not visible.
Some problem in sharing.
Rakshit, you have muted yourself. Please unmute.
Dr. Rachit, please unmute. He is muted. Problem.
If he has problem, we can start with the next presentation. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. I think we should go with the millet because Sujay is not audible.
Yes, Dr. Sharma. Now you take over the floor and have this presentation ready. Dr. T. Sharma.
Dr. Sujay, you kindly wait and we will start with the millet. Dr. Tonapi, please go ahead.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, your slides are visible. You are audible. You please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Good morning, Chairman, sir, and Co-Chairman, sir, Dr. T. Sharma ji. then all the very learned people on this platform. I'm just trying to put together the situation of bridging the yield gaps in sorghum and pearl millet, these two crops which built the seed industry in the country with the hybrids that were evolved in 60s. So coming to the current scenario and impact of improvement of the programs on production and productivity. Sir, we contribute about 170 lakh tons of millets where sorghum and pearl millet are 80%. And we also contribute to 80% of Asia's and 20% of the global production. So global average yield is 1229 kgs and India's average yield is 1239 kgs, all put together, all crops. So now coming to the sorghum and pearl millet per se, among millets, pearl millet stands number one in terms of the production, 48.8%, and 38.6% is contributed by sorghum. And remaining proportion is contributed by other millets. So looking at the scenario in the last 6 years, we find that there is a stability in the last 3 years because of the programs and the policies that were framed around. And we find the stability in production in the areas and the sustainability that has crept in. And globally, if we can see, this is how the scenario looks like. This is the sorghum, India and spread across. And again, this is basically confined to India and then coming to the area states, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, they become the dominant states here in terms of Gujarat and Maharashtra and all other states basically put together. Then coming to the productivity across different countries, we find the USA stands first in terms of the area, in terms of the production, but in terms of productivity in sorghum, we find the Europe, Italy, France, productivity followed by Egypt, China, and other crops. Then in case of pearl millet, it is India's game altogether because they're a dominant player in pearl millet production and productivity in the world. So India stands number one in terms of area, production, and by productivity, Morocco is the number one. Then coming to the contribution of different crops put together, sorghum stands sixth in terms of our contribution to the world production. And in terms of pearl millet, we are the number one in terms of the dominant players. So this is how the scenario looks like. 100% of other millets, 7% of sorghum, 45% pearl millet to the rest of the world. This is the production map of India clustered across different states, all these crops put together, but sorghum, pearl millet, and finger millet become the dominant players. In terms of the major production zones, characterized by two environments, Kharif and Rabi. Because of the short day plant nature, it is characterized in two different ecosystems, and both are different in terms of the plant types and also the quality that is production. Kharif environment is characterized by hybrids and Rabi environment is characterized by the varieties. Again, there are primary production ecosystems, secondary ecosystems, and tertiary based on their soil types and all other factors put together. In terms of Bajra, this is how the scenario looks like, dominated by Rajasthan, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, and all other states put together. But the highest area is in Rajasthan, around 5 million hectares. This is the scenario, unlike other crops where we see the zooming up of production and area increase and everything. What happened before from Green Revolution period or before Green Revolution period till now? The red line area has declined almost by 56%. Then the basically has zoomed up because of the crop improvement impact by 228%. And adoption of new varieties. Then in 65-70, we were contributing 20% to the food basket, but now we contribute about 6% to the food basket. But these crops are very, very important in terms of the drought tolerance and also the nutrition factors. So now the policies around these things have improved, and I think this scenario should change. Because of lack of policies, these crops were pushed to the background. In case of pearl millet, again, the same scenario, decline in area, production stands here, and the productivity has zoomed in terms of across the years. And again, in sorghum, it is the same scenario, but we lost more area here, and the productivity has increased to the tune of more than 1 ton now. So, but again, in Kharif and Rabi scenario, if we really look at Kharif, which is characterized by hybrids, has lost more of the area. And basically, this is the Kharif scenario, which we lost almost about 3.2 million hectares here. And I will come to the dynamics why this particular scenario changed. And in terms of Rabi, it has been stable. Again, the production scenario, it has been a decline in area could be seen. This is how the productivity increases could be seen. And this change in last 7 years, if we see, in case of Kharif, we lost 33% of area. In case of Rabi, 19%. In terms of, we have increased by 1.6% in Kharif, % in Rabi. In terms of productivity, this is the 51% increase in Kharif, 47% in Rabi. It looks like from 14 to 20, the change is stable, and in fact, it is improving because of the policies around. If we can see in Jowar in the last years, 15% area we lost, increased by 35.1%. In Bajra, we lost 7% of area, yield increased by 0.9. In again, finger millet, it was a negative growth, and all other millets put together, we lost 13% of area, but enhanced the yield by 13%. This is what it really looks like, decline in areas and increase in production, and this is the kind of productivity. 35% increase in productivity in Bajra, in Jowar, about 1% increase in productivity in last 4 years. Again, in Ragi, it is negative, and small millets, this is the scenario. So coming to the total scenario, what we look like, how the productivities from 14 to 20, if we could see, there is a gradual increase in the productivity because of the crop improvement program and impact of new varieties and their acceptance, both in Kharif and Rabi situations. This is what is the total scenario. Millets have lost 56% of the area, but production has increased by 45% and productivity by 228%. Now, coming to the factors that change the dynamics of the area in production, we find that the competitive crops, maize, soybean, cotton, these are the 3 main crops which really push these particular crops into the background because of the lack of markets. So the markets were not created, the policies were not there. That is how the these crops which had the markets really pushed these crops to the background. So therefore, policy support is the main reason why there was a decline, which as there were no policies basically. And in terms of the consumption side, the change in food habits and non-availability and supply chains were not there, and the value chains were not developed. That's how the kind of things changed in terms of consumption patterns. Then the extension efforts around these crops, though they were called as the nutritive value of millets, which was never highlighted, and the cereals basically which can really address the lifestyle diseases need to be brought to the food plate of all. So the yield gaps and what needs to be done is an important aspect. Across the states, if we see, in Rajasthan, it is 350% yield gap. In Andhra Pradesh, again, so you can see the range of yield gap across the states depending on the climatic situations. And between the farmer practices and the average yield gap, again, you would see that different states have a different proportion of the yield gaps which needs to be abridged. But this is all characterized by the kind of soil types, soil depths, then the rainfall situation in primary, secondary, and tertiary zones, and the evapotranspiration. These particular things really dictate how the crops perform, how the yield and productivities are sustained in these particular areas. So kind of analysis that has been done through the simulation modeling, basically, what is the possible productivity increase in Kharif sorghum could be achieved is 3 to 4 times. In Rabi sorghum, 1.4 to 2.7 times. In pearl millet, 1.8 to 2.3 times. And this is how the simulated potential yield, if we can look at these particular crops, have a greater thing to offer, provided we bring them into a better ecosystem and give them a policy push, so that these two crops, which are called as nutri cereals, have a greater role to play in terms of better income to the farmer through the value chain strengthening. And what is emerging basically from this is grain yields generally fluctuate between 25 to 50% of potential yields. Farmers' yields tend to underestimate potential yields because there are farmers who get 2 times the more the potential yields what has been exhibited through the varietal releases. Then simple crop simulation models have shown that there is a possibility of 4 to the potential yield. Fertility and weed management are the important aspects, and including the soil depth. So these things play an important role, which we need to address, and the greater potential exists in the yield gap by improving the agronomic packages. Good agricultural practices are important, basically. Then growing high-yielding crop varieties, especially in case of Rabi, which is the dry ecosystem, the seed supply, access to quality seeds is the limitation there. And the value chain and the value addition are the important aspects we need to be really looking at. So now coming to the last part of this presentation, possible technical options, specific constraints, and crop-specific strategies we need to be implying in order to bridge these yield gaps. So what is really required is, till now we all focused on yield and yield, never we focused on the trade per se. Probably diversification is very important of Kharif sorghum, end-use specific breeding, wider adaptation, industry utilization, and biofortification. So these 2 things are important, along with achieving grain mold resistance, which declined the area by 3 million hectares in Kharif sorghum, and shoot fly. These 2 things we are addressing through the genomic approach, and we have greater achievements till now that has been looked at. And in Rabi sorghum, basically terminal drought and charcoal rot, and the genetic diversification is important through the use of new germplasm. Then the sweet sorghum, and in case of sweet sorghum, again, the better, what you call the juice yields and the bricks contents, and in forage sorghum, per day higher productivity, and in pearl millet, heat tolerance and downy mildew and blast resistance. In small millets, basically addressing the recombination breeding. This is what is an important aspect. But in pearl millet, coming to this, so if we characterize the low potential yield areas, we need to be focusing on drought, stable grain and store productivity, then the store quality and crop management. In high potential rain-fed areas, it is the potential productivity, lodging resistance, grain and store quality, and response to improved management. And in irrigated areas, again, the heat tolerance and downy mildew, along with the crop management, would really look at the enhanced productivity scenario. Coming to the target zones, in these states, we need to be addressing differently. All these zones basically are characterized by these 3 different ecosystems of rain-fed areas, areas with supplemental irrigation, and areas with summer areas and summer irrigated areas. This is what we are really looking at. In sorghum, drought tolerance, industrial utilization for starch and feed, basically in Kharif. In sweet sorghum, basically for juice recovery, bricks, because there is a favorable bioethanol policy for first generation and second generation biofuels, and sorghum is the national feedstock included in the national biofuel policy. Then the semi-processed ready-to-eat foods, that is the value addition, value chains enhancement, and for forage, it is the high biomass sorghums for the second generation. In terms of genetic diversity, we need to be focusing on different land races, Zira, basically for improving the grain qualities, Duras to resist in order to improve the resistance to drought and shoot fly, Kafits basically to look at the basis of nuclear and cytoplasmic male sterility systems. Then Guinea is basically to look at the grain mold resistance, and in bicolors for the forage states, which we are focusing very seriously to see that the bottlenecks are addressed in a best way. So in terms of different type approaches, the short duration ones, better grain quality, and resistance to basically charcoal rot and shoot fly, and drought and cold. This is how the idiotype approach has been looked at for the shallow, medium, and deep soils with a kind of root systems on the flowering and maturity are the important aspects. In forage, we are looking at reducing the lignin content to increase the palatability, and so that the forage area, in fact, we talk about the sorghum area of only about 5.2 million hectares. But if we look at the forage sorghum area, this is about 4.2 million hectares, which we never take into account in the area of the total sorghums, which is documented in the country. We are really looking at the molecular approaches, QTLs for a shoot fly, then this diseases, the stay green approaches. There are three varieties, new varieties with the stay green have been and getting released, and also for the QTL for the agronomic traits and the marker dose development, and especially basically for first fertility restoration genes, which we are looking at. So the way forward for sorghum is addressing molds and grain quality, short duration hybrids with erect leaf type for high density planting. In Rabi, basically for specific varieties for grain quality, and exploiting heterosis, because hybrids here do not surpass the yields of varieties. The genetic gain that is seen is not manifested in the farmers' fields. In forage sorghum, high digestibility and improved seed yield, and in sweet sorghum, basically keeping quality of the juice and the second generation biofuels. In downy mildew, in pearl millet, downy mildew, the biofortification, then the hybrids for A1 zone is an important aspect we need to be looking at, because the yield levels are very, very low there. We need to be looking at least doubling the yield levels so that the farmer income is increased in these particular zones. Then application of biotechnology. So the kind of scenario that is emerging now really looks at two important things. We have the transgenics for stem borer, but the policy is not good. We have capability to have transgenics in terms of what you call herbicide tolerance, improving the efficiency crops in the weed competition scenario, and also the transgenics basically for other traits. It is possible, and we have not stopped the research. Probably we are looking at shoot fly, grain mold, and aphids, so that the productivity increase is possible when these could be introduced, when the policy framework becomes favorable in the country. So we are looking, working with the ICRSAT on the HTP phenotyping strategies for characterizing the millets, development of the genomic resources, whether it is the basically SMP platforms and other areas, and rapid generation advancement and speed breeding platforms are exploited so that we really reduce the time taken for the varietal development. This is how we are looking at taking it to the higher level with the genome-wide gene editing. This, I think, this is the capacity building is very, very important. I think the council, probably in all the institute, in the major crops, we need to build the capacities so that we would achieve the genetic gain in a bigger scenario. So these crops need to be having strategies in a different way to see that area expansion happens horizontally. The incremental advances happen in the yield gain scientifically, but again, it is the demand-led scenario we need to be improving. We need to be improving supply side factors and creating awareness about these crops, of their health benefits, developing a value chain so that the demand side factors are addressed. Price side factors need to be addressed because the supply side need to be improved. Policy factors basically are to mainstream them in the public funded programs so that the diversity in food plate and the nutrition security is addressed. In others, basically export competitiveness of these millets need to be taken up. FPOs strengthening and the farm gate processing are important aspect we need to be looking at. IIMR being the pioneer in establishing the value chain, we have really created an ecosystem of linking the farmer to the food processor in the market and also the value chain and the value addition. Till now, we have created about 400 millet startups whose investment is to the tune of 2,200 crores. So that's how we think creating value addition, entrepreneurship development, skill development, and the startup movement probably gives better demand generation for this. In the last 6 years, we have developed about 110 value-added products for ready-to-eat and ready-to-cook things in all the millets put together, including jowar and bajra. So there are a lot of things need to be mainstreamed, basically. What we call paddy rice is the only rice it is known, but small millets, there are 7 rices. So 1 rice a day is the kind of diversity that can get created in mainstream millets to everybody's food plate. So popularization, business incubation, the ecosystem is ripe. Policies are very, very good now. With the government has really enhanced the ecosystem. So for 2050, when the climate change and other issues which we think are going to be the right realities or wrong realities, whatever it is, we need to be ready. And this readiness comes from favorable policy situations. So we have now 5 important policy situations favorable for the millets or the sorghum and pearl millet what we are talking about. It is the National Submission on Millets, National Biofuel Policy, National Livestock Mission, Poshan Abhiyan, National Policy on FPOs, One District, One Product Policy and Microfood Processing, then the National Policy on Dryland Agriculture, which is coming up, which are really the drivers basically which are going to take forward these crops. Another positive in favor of crops is when these crops which require the very less water, about 300 to 450 millimeters of water to complete their life cycle, are the real insurance in the scenario of drought and the monsoon failure. At the food and fodder security are the important things which these crops will ensure. And other aspect is in terms of energy efficiency. It has been found that sorghum, pearl millet, and finger millet, they need less energy in terms of to produce the more productivity. Again, in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, it has been found that sorghum, pearl millet, and finger millet, they emit less gases. That's how they become environment friendly, and that's how they need to be really promoted in terms of the fact that the climate, these are the crops that provide insurance in the climate change scenario. Even in terms of nutrition, when there is elevated carbon dioxide, all these crops, maize, soybean, field peas, rice, and wheat, everyone's nutrition get affected, but it is not getting affected in sorghum and pearl millet. So this is the Myers et al. 2014 paper. So shows that these candidate crops in the climate change scenario need to be pushed up. So based on this policy favorability, we have tried to estimate what would be the projections for the future by 2050 if these crops are going to be coming back again as a major crops in the drylands or in the what you call the better endowed areas, and also in the non-traditional states. So this is the projection we have put it, sir. It is again taken into consideration for the assured rainfall area, non-assured rainfall area, and how the Kharif sorghum area is about 5 million tons to 10 million tons. This is the kind of projection we are putting for. Rabi sorghums which go for the food grains, we really look at the thing because the demand creation is huge and the value addition programs are very high, about 5 times increase in terms of the projections by 2050. In case of pearl millet, on the present about 9 to 10 million hectare area, I think we will be, sir.
Can you wind up now?
Yes, sir. Just 2 slides only, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the total projection for the pearl millet and all other millets put together. So the base aspect is for the fodder sorghum, we need to looking at, I think about 50% of the total area, about 4.2 million hectares would be about another 10 million hectares. That is what is going to be around forage. For the biofuel policy, I think we are working with the sugar industries. The at least about 1 million hectare area in the next 2 years should come under this. So the roadmap, coming to the last slide, sir, for enhanced income, production, consumption, nutrition, and exports. Access to quality seeds is the #1 aspect. Enhancing seed and varietal replacement rate through strengthening of the community seed systems. Vertical expansion is through, again, to the trait-led genomics. So we need to be focusing for in case of sorghum, all season cultivars, short duration hybrids with rake leaf types, air leaf idiotypes for high density planting, and product diversification in pearl millet is needed for demand-led infusion. For horizontal expansion, we need to be exploring non-traditional states. We have had the trials in UP, Bihar, Punjab. Yields are to the tune of 7 tons in case of sorghum and pearl millet. In case of small millets, about 4.5 tons. In rice fallows, also about 8.5 tons. And health benefit and awareness-led demand generation and area expansion will be the trigger that is going to happen. And then incentivizing cultivation for millets needs to come. I think this is what has been implemented in Karnataka and Orissa. I think this, if it can be done, it will really help even in mainstreaming these millets in the states of Punjab, Haryana, and UP also, because there are short duration cultivars which can be fitted between the rice and wheat cultivation system. Then better agronomy, good agricultural practices, and moisture conservation and the watershed development. Cooperative, collective, and FPO-led farming are the important things, because what is required also here is the pre and post harvest mechanization, because this is what has really, absence of these has really led to the decline in area. Quality standards for procurement, value addition, value chain strengthening. So there is a policy around this which is going to push this area, and also production and productivity. Then FPO movement of farm gate processing linked with the food industry is an important aspect we need to be really pushing further. Then digital buyer sell markets for the domestic and global exports. With Apida, it is happening. I feel this is the right time to be happening to push these crops further, to mainstream them. Then mainstreaming millets for nutrition in the public funded program is an important aspect which will really improve the demand and also enhance the area production and productivity. Then finally, diversified agriculture, diversified food plates, and food and nutrition security are the things being addressed by these crops, both the SDG and SDG 1 and 2, food and nutrition security. So this is what I just wanted to present, sir. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tonapi. You have given a very good overview of how we are proceeding with millets and sorghum, and also suggested some new areas how we can use those for filling the yield gaps. I'm sure that while making the policy paper document, some of these will be reflected in a very clear form, how we can develop them as a specific strategy and goals which can be achieved by India. So thank you very much, and we will discuss more during the discussion time. So now I will request Dr. Sujay Rakshit, Director of Indian Institute of Maize Research. I'm sure he is ready now. Dr. Sujay, you have only 15 minutes because we are already late, and try to complete within 15 minutes. Go to slide view. Your slides are visible. Can you go to slide? Yeah, here.
Sorry, sir. My apologies. Yeah, respected chairman and Dr. Paroda and other senior, most of you were our teachers and dear colleagues. My apology that there was some technical glitch. So I thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity to speak on strategy for bridging the yield gaps in maize. So if you see worldwide, maize is the highest producing cereal grain. though area-wise, wheat is the most important. But if you see the compound annual growth rate worldwide, maize is having the highest share. But in terms of production and area, India ranks 4th in terms of area and 7th in terms of production. And this is mainly because of low yield as compared to the world average. Now, the trajectory of maize growth in India is very impressive, that we have gained almost 15%, 15 times production gain as compared to 1950s. And if you see area, production and yield growth rate, compare with any of the cereals, it is one of the highest. Now in India, these are the 6 states which is shown in green color. They are the main producer of maize, followed by states represented in blue color: Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh, and remaining states are also producing. So in India, maize is grown in 3 seasons, but principally Kharif as a Kharif crop. Now, state-wise, it is Karnataka, followed by Madhya Pradesh, are having highest area as well as production. This is followed by Maharashtra, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh in terms of area. But in terms of production, if you see that it is the Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and West Bengal are much ahead of Maharashtra and Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. This is because if you see the state-wise productivity, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, and Telangana are having much higher than the national average. Rest all the states are having below average productivity, particularly the states which have been shown in red color, red bar. They are the states which are coming among the top 10 maize growing states. But due to their very low productivity, overall share of these states to the national maize production is quite less. Now, if you look at the maize mega environment, as I was mentioning that around 82% of the area is under Kharif season, around 16% is during Rabi season, and around 2%, most of this spring season, that is not recorded. But the productivity is highest during spring season, followed by Rabi season, it is around 4.2, while Kharif productivity is around 2.6 ton per hectare. Now, if you see the total maize area, out of this, around 20% is irrigated and around 80% is rain-fed. So out of this 20%, the 2% area under spring, it is totally under very high input condition, but their main stress is heat stress. Then the 16% area under winter maize is in a very assured ecology, and around 2% of the Kharif area is also under proper irrigation. Now, if you look at the rain-fed situation, around 11% is having optimal moisture, which is having good environment without major stress. But around 16%, which is subjected to drought because that is grown in less than 500 millimeter rainfall, where drought plus minus heat. Then another area where rainfall is very high, so there is excess moisture and waterlogging. And remaining around 38%, where in the same season, sometimes there is drought coupled with heat or without heat, and another stage, it is subjected to waterlogging. So in general, if you see, around 70% of the total maize area in India is grown in stress-prone or marginal condition. Now, if we need to increase the total maize production, we'll have to focus this Kharif season, which is the main maize growing season, and the yield is quite low. Now, when we talk about different districts, around 542 districts have reported maize cultivation. You can see the average yield is 26.3 quintal per hectare, but the range is huge. Some districts are recording only 500 kg, some are recording as high as 94 quintal per hectare. So if you see which are the number of districts are different brackets, in green color, you have shown that those who are having above the Kharif productivity, these districts are quite less, but main districts are which are red and other colors, they are having much lower productivity than the national Kharif productivity. So now question comes that where we need to focus. Either we focus on the districts which are having very high productivity, or we focus on the districts where the productivity is very low. But we need to see that what is the area under this. So here you can see that over years, around 500 plus districts have reported maize cultivation. So out of this, you can find that consistently around 34 to 35 districts, they are consistently reporting more than 50,000 hectare under maize. So if we need to really increase the production, if we can increase the yield level of these states, these districts, I think very easily we can increase our national yield level. Now here you can see that over year, these are the districts which are reporting more than 50,000 hectare maize under maize. And if you see the share of these districts, which are shown in line diagram, it is almost 55 to 60% of the total Kharif area as well as Kharif production. So that means these districts are contributing major area under Kharif maize. Now over here in the lower panel, if you see the yield level of this average yield level of these districts, they have from 1997 to 1998, they until now they are hovering around a little more than 2 tons per hectare. So certainly we have not focused much on these districts. Now, if we group these districts into two, one is which are having above the national average Kharif average yield, which are shown in magenta color, and you can see that they are substantial in number. Similarly, the other one which is shown in the blue colors, they are sometimes the number of those districts are much higher than number of districts which are having above national average. Like if you say take the example of 2018-19. So and there, if you see these districts which are shown the line diagram in blue color, their yield level has not substantially increased as it has been increased through those districts which are having more than national average. So if you look at these districts, like the districts which they are representing around 50% of the total districts which are having more than 50,000 area. So those districts in the left side which we have shown, they are contributing around 68% of the total Kharif production. But there are another 50% of the districts are there, which is having substantial area, but they are contributing very less, around 32% of the production. So we need to focus on these districts. So these are the districts in the left panel. We have identified around 28 districts where the area is around 50,000 or more, 50,000 hectare or more, but their productivity is much lesser. And the right panel, their area is again more than 50,000, but the productivity is more. So these are the around 50 plus districts which we focus intensively. Certainly the national productivity can increase substantially. Now we all know that yield gap can be viewed in different ways: potential yield, then experimentation yield, then potential farm yield and actual farm yield. So the Snyder and his team, they defined this yield gap 2, which is the economically attainable. It has got two components, that is a biological constant, another is socio-economic constant. So biological constant we can address through transfer of technology with our extension activities, and but the socio-economic constants needs a lot of government support or policy support, which unfortunately maize is not that lucky to have. Now, if we look at the second yield gap, that yield gap 1, which is more the management practices. Management practice can substantially improve the yield gap. Mostly, we the breeders are trying to reach to the potential yield, but management aspect plays a very important role. Now, this three yield aspect, that is a potential yield, attainable yield, and actual yield, which ultimately is used for calculation of yield gap. It has got three main aspects. One is the varietal factors, another is environmental factors, another is management factors. So environmental factor mostly are not in our hand, but manipulating this varietal and the management aspects, we can substantially address these yield gaps quite effectively. Now, today's during inauguration session, our Honorable Secretary Dear and DG ICR was mentioning about only 10% of our germplasm in the gene bank has been used. So recently we have taken out the nearly 12,000 accessions from the gene bank, and they have been evaluated in our Begusarai. center. And now we have identified lines, and they are now further being evaluated for various biotic and abiotic stresses and quality aspects. So this is in a big way we have deployed drones to capture data and other things. Now, when we talk about genetic improvement, germplasm diversification is the most crucial one. So first is that integration of exotic and wild alleles, particularly use of temperate germplasm, that is very much required, and we are working on that. Then recycling of lines. This is quite very important, and this should be done in a very systematic manner. Dr. S.K. Vassal is present here. He is continuously guiding us. So in this aspect, the main thing is required that systematic characterization and heterotic grouping of the lines. Unfortunately, in between, we didn't focus much on this line. So we are now extensively working to group our whole germplasm into different heterotic groups, and accordingly, we are putting them, developing the heterotic pools, and then recycling the lines. And in that process, advanced tools like DH technology, genomic selection, and precision phenotyping are very important. This is at this moment we are due to various reasons, we have not been able to use this DH technology extensively, but I'm very sure that in days to come, we'll be able to deploy all these advanced tools more effectively. Then we need to combine tolerance. Like I was mentioning that in the same season, sometimes the crop experiences drought, and the same after some time it experiences waterlogging, and then biotic stresses are already there. We all know the menace of fall armyworm, which maize is facing now. So there is a need to combine different tolerances. But when we talk about maize, mainly we talk about the grain maize. But we know that there is a diverse uses of maize, that is the specialty corn, be it sweet corn, baby corn, popcorn, QPM, and silage and fodder maize, and of late the bioethanol. So this needs special attention, and we are reorienting our research towards this direction. So we know this is this breeding funnel, that we start with large number of accession, we slowly come down, and to increase the breeding efficiency as well as the genetic gain, we need to increase the selection intensity and the heritability, and reduce the cycle time. And here, the biggest advantage maize is having is the double haploid technology, which we need to exploit extensively by establishing facility at the right place. Now, I was mentioning that only by genetic improving the yielding ability of our material or parental line or hybrids, we cannot attain our goal. We will have to take care the management aspects also. So of late, we have realized this, and now we are trying to focus more on genotype, environment, and management interaction, so that we can really achieve much higher grain yield. And here, I just briefly will talk about the maize-based cropping system. Quite often, when maize comes, it comes in the context of diversification of the rice-based cropping system, and there we just compare the per se yield of maize vis-a-vis rice. But we need to look at the system perspective. Like if you take maize, very easily, if you take a long duration crop, you can attain 30 quintal per acre yield. The advantage is that the field will be free within 110 or 115 days. So you'll be having some buffer time for going for timely planting, which can give 10% higher yield if of wheat or mustard, whatever we take. And then after harvest, we can very easily take another crop, that is mung bean. So maize, wheat, mung bean, or maize, mustard, mung bean are the most profitable cropping system, where the system productivity can be addressed very significantly without compromising with the extensive use of groundwater or the problem of residue burning and others, greenhouse gas emission and other things. Like wheat management, I was telling, another aspect is very important. And
you have left with 2 minutes.
Okay, sir. Okay. So these are the some of the chemicals which are very effective in managing weeds. Similarly, mechanization in maize cultivation is very much needed, because if we establish proper plant population, that is that will give best yield. So race-based bed maker come planter and pneumatic planter are very useful for large-scale planting. But we have for single seed planting also seed come fertilizer drills, so that can be used. And we have demonstrated this mechanization across 100 acre in Telangana, which has shown that nearly 15% reduction in overall cost of cultivation. So, sir, this is one initiative we have taken with the instruction from our Honorable Director General, that we are trying to demonstrate that what is the system achievable in the states of Punjab and Haryana, where we are growing maize and the side by side with rice. And around 10 districts we have taken, 5 districts in Punjab and 5 districts in Haryana. So around 150 acres that are demonstration going on. We are organizing field day, and we have also developed, and this we are doing in collaboration with CIMIT, and we have developed one policy paper that how we can go for diversification using maize. Sir, our frontline demonstration shows that in case of Rabi, there is a yield gap of around 22%, while in case of Kharif, there is a yield gap of around 38%. And this can be achieved with proper training, and we are extensively working. There are some biotic stress are also haunting us, particularly fall armyworm. We are working on that. We have developed extensive awareness, and now we are having good control, but yes, it has increased the cost of cultivation for the farmers. Another is post-harvest management. Both aflatoxin as well as rice weevil, they cause a lot of damage to the maize crop, and which comes mostly from the field. So we need to really focus very seriously on this. And in this aspect, proper drying and storage facility wherever we are trying to promote maize, that is very much required. So, sir, hybrid seed production, our requirement is very high, nearly 200,000 tons requirement. There is substantial deficit, but these are the one of our hybrid which has been given to one MSME company, and the packing they have made and they are marketing. So there is the need of partnership with MSME. In this context, I have taken this slide from Dr. Prasanna, that we need to think the equality vis-a-vis the equity. Like the MSME, multinational companies, their funding and their business aggressiveness is much higher than public sector. So really we cannot compete with them. But there are many MSME companies who need our handholding. But there is some need of policy intervention so that they are equally benefited and we come to a win-win situation. So now, before I end, I would like to summarize. The first thing we need to do is enhancing the rate of genetic gain through germplasm diversification and broadening the genetic base using wild species as well as tempered sources. Then development of hybrid-oriented germplasm and recycling of inbred lines, which is very important area, which Dr. I think Dr. Vassal will also mention about that, for that proper classification and grouping of in terms of their heterotic behavior. Then use of new tools, DH, genomic selection, and genome editing. Climate resilient hybrids are required because, as I mentioned, that nearly 70% of the maize area is having some way or other stresses. So drought plus heat, or drought plus minus waterlogging and high temperature. Then suitable management of diseases and insects are very much important. Then improvement of nutritional traits, QPM plus vitamin A. Our IRI team is doing very good work. We are also working this. The low phytate, high methionine, high iron and zinc. Then partnership in germplasm exchange. Here I was mentioning that equitable partnership with MSME seed companies, that is very much required. And then enhancing the resource efficiency through optimum plant population and efficient weed management, that is very much required. And along with mechanization and conservation agriculture, because it has been demonstrated that mechanization and conservation agriculture can improve the soil health, and it can improve the yield of not only maize but subsequent crop as well. We need to look at the new ecologies, particularly wherever water stress is there, like Punjab, Haryana, or upland rice or boro rice. Like in Eastern India, a lot of boro rice is cultivated, which guzzles a lot of water. So really we can push maize, and I'm happy to say that now in state of West Bengal, Bihar has already, maize has spread a lot, but in West Bengal also it is spreading very fast. But finally, the policy support, because till now, till few years back, millets was also not having much policy support, but now it has got very good policy support. But maize also needs some amount of policy support. It is not that if private sector is very strong, so we should not invest that much. Maize being a cross-pollinated crop, it requires a lot of investment, and we look forward for that kind of support. And when we take up any policy decision, we should take the district-centric approach rather than whole region-based, because I have highlighted that there are around 50 districts are there. If we can focus on them in a holistic manner, certainly our the yield gap which is there, that can be bridged very significantly. So, and ultimately we'll have to upscale the hybrid adoption, and for that public-private partnership is very much required. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sujay, for making excellent presentation and also showing the various initiatives which IIMR has taken in the recent past, and identification of 28 districts which have low productivity, and also suggesting various ways how we can maximize the productivity and increase the genetic gain, particularly in hybrid maize. So thank you very much, and we will be discussing it more. Now coming to the last presentation, Dr. N.P. Singh on pulses, Director, Indian Institute of Pulse Research.
Am I audible, sir? Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. So can I share my presentation?
Dr. N.P. Singh, you have only 15 minutes for presentation.
Okay, sir.
We are losing time for discussion because we have many senior colleagues and senior mentors sitting here. We need their input.
Honorable Dr. Paroda sir, Professor R.B. Singh sir, Chairman of this particular session, Dr. P.L. Gautam sir, and Deputy DG Crop Science, Dr. T.R. Sharma sir. I see a lot of learned people. They have joined this meeting. Good afternoon to all of you. I will be speaking mainly what is the strategy for bridging the yield gap, particularly in the pulses. Pulses, we know for its nutrition in the country, we need, if we need a nutritional security, we must focus on the pulses. And not only they are required, for nutritional security, but they are also required, for sustainability of our cropping system, farming system, and for ecological security. And if you look at the nutrition of these pulses, not only they are very rich in the protein, but they are also very rich source, of the fat, carbohydrates, and they are very good in minerals. In very recent years, we come to know that there is a lot of folic acids also in these crops, and they are much better than many other crops which are grown, in cereals. Sir, if we look at the scenario of pulses in India, the entire scenario has changed in last 1 decade. Earlier, we used to have about 12 to 14 million ton production, and that was stagnant, for 4 decades. But now our pulse production, if we see last 5 years, so that has gone to 23 to 26 million ton. And what we need today is about 28 million tons of pulses to make country self-sufficient. So we are very close to self-sufficient based on the estimation that has come, through ICMR, that persons should eat, 52 grams per capita per day. And if you look at this revolution, basically this has come through technology upscaling and innovation in the seed system. We have been always deficient, in the seeds, quality seeds, and even, shortage in the breeder seed productions. And more important was the policy support. And these are the things, they really triggered, the pulse revolution, in India. And we could have a quantum jump, over a period of time. And this resulted, if you look at here, reduction in the import. Our now import is about 2 to 2.5 million tons that we are getting, and about 10,000 crore. Otherwise, this was also going in the same way. Now we are now in the ILC sector. Sir, if we just try to analyze the yield gap, it's difficult for me to give, in all the states yield gap because there are a number of crops in the pulses. But if we look at we have about 60,000 demonstration, cluster demonstration. It was very special efforts by the government of India, and it was conducted in 474 KBK and 26 states. And here, again, if you see the yield gap, and what we try to compare here is the yield in our frontline demonstration, and in the same field, the kind of, the farmer practice. And in each crop, if we see, even the crop like chickpea, where there is substantial increase in the productivity over the period of time, there is about 54%, lentil 69%, and field pea 55%, green gram 30%, black gram about 38%, and another important crop that is catching up is the rasma, where almost it is a 50%. So what I mean to say, these are the rain-fed crops, and basically it is expected that there is going to be yield gap. Then what we get, and this is kind of yield gap, what we call yield gap 2. And if we see the yield gap 1, where the potential yield and the one that we get in the farmer's field through our FLD, that is still very huge, more than 100%. So, and we try to compare, the yield in the FLD, particularly, 3 major states, PNP in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and again chickpea again in these 3 states. Even if you see, there is a huge yield gaps here. Even in chickpea in Maharashtra, 93%. And similarly, we are having a yield gap, in all the crops. Even one of the major states where 36 to 40% area of pulses are there in Madhya Pradesh, there is a huge yield gap. Sir, there are issues are still the same, what it used to be earlier, that we do not have the timely availability of the quality seeds of yielding variety, though we have changed the scenario to some extent. There is a terminal drought and heat stress, particularly in the Rabi crops, and again moisture and heat stress in the Kharif as well, though it is intermittent. When there is a long dry spell, normally we have a kind of, being saturation crop would have been a moon bean. There is huge loss because of this. There is incidence of thrips. They are the major menace, in the particularly summer and spring season. And we have the gram pod borer, a number of other things, and one of the menace, is the blue bull that you see in major area where the pulses were earlier grown. Because of this animal, the farmers are not willing to take these crops. And there are crop-wise and region-wise very specific issues, like in Central India, we have fusarium wilt, dry root rot, pod borer, and drought, heat. And Northern India, we are having the Escocaita blight, BGM, cold, frost. So the issues are different in Northern India, and issues are different, in the Southern India. Eastern India is one, there is a lot of potential, particularly in rice fallow, but still, we have not achieved breakthrough in this particular area. Major breakthrough has come basically from Central and Southern India. And in the pigeon pea, again, here the crop is mainly grown now almost 70-75% in Central Southern India. Here again, there are a lot of stresses, biotic and abiotics, they are there. Beginner crops are the crops, they are grown in multiple seasons, and they are, grown in a different niches. Here again, there are stresses. YMB is major menace. Again, we have a powdery mildew in Southern India, and moisture stress in Southern India is another one, which is a major constraint in this particular crop. Sir, if you look at how we have reached to 24 million tons, 25 million tons in last 1 decade, it gives us the lesson that how to go. And what we have tried to do is the development of the new variety and having a multiple stress resistance. Almost all our variety are fusarium wilt resistance. And, we have a better now control of Helicoverpa, pod borer, particularly in chickpea, pigeon pea. We try to match the good agronomy with the, with new varieties. We were able to manage, through chemicals, some of the biotic stresses. And again, promoted mung bean in spring and summer. Almost 1 million hectare area has gone, in northwest plain zone, that is Indo-Gangetic plain under the mung bean. And this is used, for diversification and intensification. We have introduced pulses, particularly early pigeon pea in a soybean wheat system in the Central India. again, cotton, wheat, again, this crop has gone as an intercrop. And we also see that this crop, particularly in large area, mainly we see Gujarat and Maharashtra, where it is grown as intercrops. So in this area also, we try to intensify, and diversify by intercropping. And our 50% demonstrations were on intercrops. And again, we have been able to promote, these pulses in rice fallow. And I'm happy to say that about 1 million hectare area in eastern India, rice fallow has been covered by these 3 crops. I mean, going to the down south, urad bean and moong bean has come in rice fallow in a big way. And if we see what we have done, particularly in the research front, we have developed, particularly we have reduced the duration of the crop from 75 days moong bean. Now we have a 55 days moong bean. Lentil, we are able to reduce, by 20 days, and chickpea again, 135 days to 100 days. This has provided a window for these crops, to be grown in a different, very diverse cropping system. Seed size, again, we have made a major breakthrough, particularly in Kabuli chickpea, that from 35 gram, most of the variety used to have 35 gram, now we have a 55 gram. So we are now one of the major exporter of the Kabuli chickpea to the Middle East and the European country. We were able to now insulate most of our variety, with the YMB, and we brought, the settling tolerance and synchronous maturity. This has provided, a chance for these crops to reduce labors, and they become very fit, in a different cropping system. Now we have got a chickpea which is responsive to high input. Particularly, we feel that chickpea, this is the way it can be rehabilitated, in northern India once again. And again, we have a machine harvestable chickpea. This can be another inventions that we have in recent years. And green seeded pea is the another one, that it is a replacement of the vegetable pea. And now we have a mass product in place in chickpea, at least 5 variety in last 2 years. We have come with the chickpea, having the biotic and abiotic tolerance embedded in that. We have biofortified lentil and chickpea. Chickpea almost 26 to 27%, high protein. Now hybrids are reality in pigeon pea. We have been working for last 2-3 decades, but now these have become reality, though there is still major area to come under the hybrid in pigeon pea. Sir, one crop I would like to show as an example how that has grown. In 10 years, the total production is double in this particular crop. I remember 2007-8 where the chickpea, the area was 7.54, and 1920 become almost 11 million tons. Latest data says, and the production almost we have double, chickpea. With the productivity level, again 500 kg increase in the productivity of this crop. This was only possible because of short duration chickpea variety, and again, disease resistance, particularly for fusarium wilt, and the heat tolerant variety that we developed so that the crop, doesn't suffer, heat stress. Similarly, extra large seeded Kabuli is the one invention that we are able to now, in place of importing country, now India is one of the exporting country. Now, machine harvesting is one of the prerequisites if these crops have to survive, in the competition with other crops. So now we have a variety, in place which can be mechanically, harvested. Sir, just one scenario I will try to say that will tell us, that how these crops have really suffered in the past. If you look at the northern India, sir, northern India, almost we have lost, the major area. And the area has increased in central southern India. So there is almost, a big shifting in the crops. And now the crop with a very favorable environment has gone to the unfavorable environment where heat and drought is the major stress. And this has really, changed the entire scenario. Entire strategy has been changed, our breeding, our varietal development, and, the seed system. Sir, what we need to really look at that we need a climate resilient varieties, because these crops, they are damaged to a very large extent. That is why the farmer, they don't like to grow it. We need a disruptive increase in potential. We are not happy with the potential of 1.5 ton in chickpea. We need somewhere, in 2.5 ton, the potential, so that, still we can, even yield gap 2, we are not able to fulfill, we should be to a very large extent get a reasonable yield, and this crop can compete with other crops in unfeed area. We need a very effective transfer of technology. We need to develop a value chain. Somehow value chain in these crops are very poor, and 15 to 20%, even sometimes 25%, there is a post-harvest losses, in these crops that need to be really reduced in the process of processing. We need to develop a very farm-gate primary processing in these crops so that the farmers get a good price. Sir, we have developed some action plan how we can really bridge the yield gap too. We have to really do a kind of very advanced level of planning, particularly for the seed. Seed we have improved a lot, over a period of time. So, and a replacement. Yes, sir.
Can you wind up in 2 minutes?
Sir?
You have 2 minutes now.
Okay, sir. And then providing, light saving irrigation will be the another way. By one can double the yield. We can ensure, the critical input, to the farmers, because we feel that once we draw the input, from the farming community, they don't like to grow these crops. Mechanization is another one, and policy support, particularly we want pulses to be brought, in a public distribution system. Though there is a procurement, but that procurement is only very, notional, and it is not even 10%. Sir, we have a large number of variety, we have a large number of technology, we have a very specific variety. This variety can be brought up, to the farming field, and really we can make a change, and we can bridge the yield gap. Again, sir, these crops are grown, as intercrops, so we need to promote more intercropping, because it will provide a kind of assurance, to the farmers that, they don't have a complete loss. We have worked out the number of systems, in a different crops. Sir, we have a very efficient intercrop, worked out, particularly in the central India, Maharashtra and Gujarat, where we are very successful and farmers are getting additional income, by taking pulses. Sir, we need to, one technology that has changed, particularly in the Kharif raised bed technology, very improved agronomy, and where, this transplanting of the pigeon pea, can really fill up the gaps. And because of the population loss, normally we don't get the kind of field that is expected. So drip irrigation, fertigation is now reality there in most area in central southern India. A sprinkler we see a reality in now in the summer crop, particularly in the mung bean, and by laser labeling and all, perhaps farmers are able to achieve the target yield with less of the water. Sir, number of things can be done with the farmers, and we have the agro technology in place. At the same time, IPM is very important in these crops, particularly, for fusarium wilt, YMB, and again Helicoverpa. For these three things we have to manage. And sir, we have made a remarkable progress in the seed system. If you look at the breeder seed, what we used to produce 10,000 quintal, now 21,000 quintal, 18,000 quintal, we have enough breeder seed now. And the quality seeds through seed hub also we are able to produce to a large quantity, and this seed is going to frontline demonstration. So this is the one invention, that we have done, and we have made remarkable progress, in the seed replacement rate. You see, most of the variety crops, it is a 32%, 36%, 40%. So it is ideal seed replacement. And if you look at the varietal replacement, still, now we are having a very ideal, 80%, 89%. And this is the one driver, for the change in the pulses. Sir, again, we have improved our extension system, particularly involved, the KBK digital platform. Through that, we are able to reach, because we feel that if the yield gap has to be bridged, we need a very strong system, particularly in these crops, particularly rain-fed areas. So a lot of things have changed. Sir, the policy has played a major role, and particularly increasing MSP and linking to the procurement, seed hub. And what we feel the last one, is required, in the public distribution system. But because that will really help, the farmers to grow the crop. Sir, we have a number of technology now in self, and we feel that if we have to increase the potential yield, we need this technology to be employed. And this is one of the examples that we have a hybrid Pigeon P in place. A number of CMS system, they are in the place, and we have diversified the CMS system, and we are able to get, a tag for the restorer gene. That has really helped us to get a very diverse, and good restorer in Pigeon P. And sir, we have another technology that is in self that need to be fine-tuned, the transgenic in chickpea and Pigeon P. And we are at the stage of event selection trial. We are hoping to get a kind of clearance for the government for the field trial. But this technology has been already there. Sir, not only we, but there are other institutions like NRC TB, Assam Agriculture University, APSET. They have a good technology, and globally also cowpea and common bean. Now this technology has been approved, for commercial cultivation in a different country. Okay. Sir, we have initiated. Sir, just 2-3 slides, sir. I will just finish. And the CRISPR technology also, sir, we have employed, and we feel there are 2 traits: seed size and the earliness that we are targeting by use. And for even RNA technology is also now in place for nematode resistance, which is a major menace, in this thing. One of the major crop that has suffered over the year because of the BOA content, we have identified 2 major genes there, and this will really help us to develop the variety with the low BOA, and this will become reality in years to come. Sir, again, another one, transcription factor gene, we have transferred, DRAP gene, and we have now very good resources, genomic resources in these crops, in all the crops now in place in pulses also. And sir, we have developed, a tag for salinity tolerance, because we feel once we introduce salinity tolerance, this crop can be rehabilitated, in Northwest India. And sir, again, now we have a mass product, 5 mass product, released very recently, and there are another 2 in the pipeline. This will again provide a technology. Bridging management system is another one that we have made, in these crops operational. Sir, the last slide, I just wanted to say that the way forward is we need self-sufficiency in pulses. For that, we need a 30 million ton by 2030 and 39 million ton by 2050. And this has to come by the productivity increase. There is still chance, to area expansion in the rice fallow and the intercrop. We need a climate resilience, and we have to really strengthen the value chain and post-harvest. Besides that, there are a number of, the futuristic technology, that we have to really integrate with that, like speed breeding, genomic selection, and all that. This is all I just wanted to share with you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. N.P. Singh. First of all, I would like to congratulate the whole pulses community for bringing out this pulse revolution in the country during these past 10 years. I always say that it's not a pulse revolution, it is protein revolution, which we have brought out. And the quantum jump in the yield from 2010 to 2021, but still we need 30 million tons of pulses to meet our demands. So we have various approaches available with us to increase pulse production, and you have identified various gaps, but still there's a long way to go as far as new technologies are concerned, which we are using in pulse improvement program. So with these words, now I would like to request Dr. P.L. Gautam to kindly continue the session with discussion, and probably we can take half an hour. I don't know, because we are already late. So Dr. Gautam, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for nicely conducting these presentations. I join you in congratulating all the speakers for excellent presentation. They have given a lot of information that what is going on and what needs to be really followed to get the desired results. You rightly mentioned about pulse revolution, and Tanopi ji mentioned very well that how the millets can play a greater role. And other people have done wonderful work in making the presentation. Not to repeat and summarize any of their presentations, I now open the topic for discussion. And we will have 15 minutes discussion because time is, we don't have much time for discussion, but certainly we will have 10 minutes, 15 minutes for discussion. Yes, please.
Can I put a question?
Yes, please identify yourself and go ahead.
I thought let me start. I'm P.K. Agrawal, Vice Chancellor OUT, sir. And thank you very much for. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, okay.
Yeah, sir, I'll make 2 or 3 small observations for kind consideration. When I was listening to millet, I felt one thing. I remember Dr. Ramesh Chan when he was talking in IC headquarters one discussion, why we are unable to replace rice, wheat and maize by millet and other crops. And from that, I'll add one sentence. Beside all other points, whatever we are talking, probably the strength of the technology is the critical factor, which needs to be replaced with a competitive technology. By rice, wheat, maize, still the technology is so strong, like Bajra, for example, it has come nearer to that as in today. But many other millets are yet to come. Coming to a level of other competitive crop. Second will be, sir, when you talk breeding, yield is one of the critical factor. But looking to the consumer liking, preference, a lot of work was done in rice and maize, rice and wheat particularly, and maize to some extent. Similar things also can be considered for other crops. Second, I'll make one comment, sir, about maize and pulses. I'll stop it if you allow me. Maize, sir, I'll make one. If you see BPK's work or many other IRA work, other work, sir, it may be low phytate, it may be QPM. Lot of initiative was taken by different organizations. But when we talk of any innovative like low phytate, for example, should we wait for a variety coming from IRA, then only you like to release, sir? Because BPK submitted a variety as good as any other hybrid, and that was submitted 10 years back. But we wait like rice, mass material available in the country long back, but we waited to improve Pusa Basmati 1 from coming from IRA, then only we released. So my point is, as a regulator of the variety release and as a developer of the system should take care of everybody in such a way that the best should come to the country. So my request will be to the system, as a developer, as a regulator, as a policy holder, the system should be encouraged in such a way that the technology should be, wherever it is available, should be encouraged. And in this context, I'll talk one more thing. Sometimes we are too biased for technique, like mass, transgenic, this, that. The farmer doesn't go there, whatever the technique is used for the release of variety. Farmers need a variety which perform. So when you go for a release system, we should not overemphasize mass or any other system. Because last 10 years, if you see, last 10 years, we talked a lot about mass, but hardly any mass product has potentially replaced the conventionally bred variety in the farmer's field. So my request will be, when you talk of variety, yield and policy, we should take context of production and farmer's point of view, not scientist point of view. The product, not the science technique point of view. So that is one of the point I believe we must take care so that our product is appreciated, not the who, what, technique, all these things. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Agrawal, for pointed 2 points. Thank you.
Sir, may I speak?
Yes, Dr. Sandhu. Dr. Sandhu,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. My voice is clear?
It's very clear.
Hello? Hello?
Dr. Sandhu, you are clear.
Okay,
Please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, sir. Sir, I would like to comment that both the speaker, Sujay Rakshit and NP Singh, has given a good account of maize and pulses. Since I worked as an agriculture commissioner, National Food Security Mission, and that mission has two very good elements, what Sujay Rakshit has said and what NP Singh has said. जो लो प्रोडक्टिव एरियाज हैं उसको कैसे टारगेट करें, और सेकंड इज इम्पॉर्टेंट उसमें टेक्नोलॉजी इन्फ्यूजन कैसे करें, चाहे वो सीड प्रोडक्शन हो, चाहे वो दूसरे एलिमेंट हो. इस दो एलिमेंट के साथ हमारा राइस का और व्हीट का और पल्सेस का प्रोडक्शन बढ़ा है, is well tested. But my question further goes like maize, we are now not growing 100% of hybrid varieties. There are composite, there are synthetic, many varieties are being grown by the farmer. How we cannot replace 100% hybrid in maize? And similarly in pulses, definitely this National Food Security Mission, after that this mission on pulses had helped in a great way, and that's why we are achieved at record production of food grains crossing 300 million tons. Definitely the pre-breeding part, wherever is wheat and rice has a given dividend, why not a maize is not taken that extensively, which we are doing in the pulses and other crops. So my comments is here that the mission like the National Food Security Mission, so that production can yield gap can be bridged. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhu. Yes, Dr. Rakshit, you have to say something on pre-breeding. No, he is not on the line. Anyway, we take the question from other speakers. Questions, please.
May I come in, sir? DK Yadav, ADG sheet.
Yeah, yes, Dr. Yadav.
Good noon, sir. Sir, mine is not question because in afternoon session I may not be there. So I would like to talk about the sheet system which we are following. You have been there, sir, and Dr. Sandhu also was there for almost 3 years. So we have the breeder sheet is the mandate of ICR, where almost we are getting the indents for 80,000 quintals or so from the DSC for almost 60 varieties, and we are producing 30% higher, 1.15 lakh quintals or so. But when we see the share of quality seed, so this year's data of DSC site, Dr. Ram Kundinya is there. So that shows that 35% quality seed is coming from public sector and 65 is coming from the private sector. And total 550 companies are working in our country. Almost 150 companies, they are having their own R&D program. If we see a total varietal improvement program, during last 7 years, we have released 1,575 varieties, of which only 13% varieties are coming from the private sector, which includes maximum in BT cotton, 57, rice, 55, maize, 49, pearl millet, sorghum, and some in brassica and sunflower and forage crop. So 87% varieties are coming from the public sector. The reputed seed companies, they have their own R&D program, own seed production and marketing program. They don't depend on to sell their seed through some other system, public sector and all that. So some 300 companies, as Dr. GP Singh has shown, so in case of wheat, maximum they have come for licensing and they are producing seed of our variety. So if we see the breeder seed indent from private sector, sir, so only 27% breeder seed indent is in case of rice, in wheat 23%, mung bean 35%, pigeon pea 8%, urd bean 16.5%, and rest of the crops, I think a very negligible breeder seed indent is coming from private sector. But how this 65% is coming, that is one issue, sir. If we see the availability state-wise, just I am giving an analysis. Haryana is procuring 95% seed from private sector. Only 5% share is from public sector. UP 84% from private sector. Gujarat 82%. Punjab 82%. Maharashtra 76%. Rajasthan 75%. West Bengal 71%. Madhya Pradesh 79%. So like this, most of the states, they are procuring private seed, and that seed, how that seed is coming, that is coming through the tender system. So this tender system, what seed is being supplied, who is supplying that? No reputed company like Bayer, Syngenta and all those, they will never go for the tendering. So this tendered seed, this is all grain which is coming there, except in case of wheat. I think a very good that homework has been done. Otherwise, in most of the crops, the seed is coming through the tender system, and that is the grain, not the seed. And we feel proud that we have reached to the level of the seed replacement which we require in the system, 35%, 50% and all that. But what is that seed? That is one question, sir. Traceability is a big issue. In our breeder seed system, sir, we have the BSP system. BSP1 starting from the indenting, then sowing, then monitoring, production, and BSP5 is the distribution to the companies. The BSP6 is with the DSE, which should monitor that from where that seed is going, what is the multiplication, how, whether it is converting or conversion is not there or not. So that part, I think we should have a very strong recommendation that this tendering system should be stopped, and the abuse of the breeder seed is generally because of this non-traceability. And the spurious seed which is coming, that is only because of the non-traceability. And I think public sector participation in oil seed and pulses and millet seed production program, that should also be increased in other crops. They are doing well, and we are also well sufficient. So in my opinion, a strong recommendation should go for a very robust seed traceability system in our country. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for highlighting this important point. And yes, this recommendation can be thought of being put in the final draft, and good to highlight it. And traceability is important, yes, for transparency. And then, of course, the system should be transparent, whatever is done. Public, private sector both have to contribute, but there should be transparency, and there should not be, the farmer should not be given spurious seeds. That's the point which is important. Thank you very much for your intervention. Any other person, please?
Sir, may I raise some questions, some points?
Dr. Dubey, yes.
Thank you, sir. I have the few points to make. Especially for the biotic stress management, the focus has to be given multiple pest resistance. Normally in the area, practically in the farmer's field, in the same area, suppose chickpea is there and pod borer and then disease problem is there, we are recommending to the same village, you grow this variety for the resistance for the pod borer and again for the wilt another variety. So farmers get confused, and sometimes the problem remain as such, non-addressed. So we have to take the multiple disease and pest resistant variety has to be focused. And weed management in other area, if it is possible, abiotic stress also has to be taken into the account. Biotic and abiotic stress jointly has to be addressed. The variety should be suitable for all these stress along with the high yield. Otherwise, we are recommending for high yield another variety, for management another variety, so it becomes problem. Weed management is a problem, especially in the eastern India. The labor problem is there, and most of the Kharif season and vegetables and others, especially in the maize and the rice, upland rice, the weed management is very, very serious problem. So weed management has to be properly addressed. In hybrid, majority of the hybrid are susceptible to pest and diseases. This has to be looked. Otherwise, sometimes what happens, very serious outbreak. From last 2 years is Eastern UP and Bihar, we have seen the false cement in the rice, especially very serious outbreak, and nothing can be saved. 70-80% loss is there. So any of the hybrid, we have to look for the resistance. These 3 points I would like to mention. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. And we come to now some other intervention, please.
Sir, I would say that all the 4 speakers, इसमें जो है डॉक्टर अग्रवाल, डॉक्टर संधू, DK यादव, दुबे जी, जो कुछ भी बोले हैं, अगर 5 लाइन का लिख के भेजेंगे तो कोई चीज छूटेगा नहीं.
Good, very good.
Hello.
We will make it as a general suggestion in the end. Okay. Yes, Dr. Shyam Sundar Singh.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I just want to put one point that is very important because I did this in case of wheat. In case of wheat, during 2008-9, the production was around 80 million tons. And our target for 2020 was 90 million tons. Then what happened? We started working with the farmers. Then we were called by the agriculture minister. Then we started with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we had 3-4 states conferences. Then what happened? We suggested the targets, what should be done, where should be done, what should be the, means I am just giving outline. Then around 2 lakh hectare in case of wheat, only 2 lakh hectare line sowing in eastern UP and Bihar. So, okay, so like this, the package of practices. So what happened? The production in 2 years means it was increased to 14 million tons. 14, that is a record, 14 million tons. I mean to say the technologies by the ICR, the scientists have already given and are available, but these are not being utilized for producing. The yield gaps are there. So we have to work together with this Ministry of Agriculture and the state government. Then only we can translate our whatever the technology is there in the form of production. This is the experience I am having. And we increased 14 million ton production of wheat in 2 years. When we crossed in 11-12, 94 million tons, means target of 90 million ton 2020. So it can be done, it can be done, it can be done. Only thing, yes, R&D, and is different. There is no relationship between research and development. We have to work together, and then only we can get the production increased. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh, for sharing your experience. And yes, there is a need for having greater collaboration with different governments, different departments. Thank you very much for this sharing this experience. Yes, please.
Sir, I'm Dr. Sanjeev Gupta, ADG Oilseed and Pulses.
Yes, Dr. Gupta.
I would like to, sir, emphasize on one point, that is the micronutrient deficiency, in particularly in 11 green revolution states. So that need to be addressed because this is the major constraint in realizing the yield levels in most of the crops. I remember, sir, Madhya Pradesh government, it is Madhya Pradesh is the pulse growing state. So when pulse system was there, so there was the deficiency of the molybdenum. So government has made a provision that in every packet of the seed of the chickpea, the ammonium molybdate, they had to supply. So those kind of interventions are required to deal with the problem of the micronutrient deficiencies. It is very serious, sir, and it can be done with the policy intervention, and this yield gap can be minimized in most of the crops. So this is my point, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very important. Thank you. Dr. Sandhu, who wants to take the floor, please? We have Dr. Vassal here. We request him for sharing his views on maize in particular. No?
Mute.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Namaskar.
Well, I think there are 2 points which I would like to say. One is there, is the investments in now. If the investments in agriculture are going down, and also we want to do more with less, I think it is very, very important the resource allocation, how it is done, because now we have technologies which there cannot be reduction in investment like all the lab work, whether it's gene editing or marker selection or anything. But on the other hand, in conventional breeding, a lot of choices, a lot of options. If there is a need 50% reduction in funding, I think I still am able to manage my program without reducing any kind of activity. The other thing, which I think is very, very important, if we want to increase the production of food grains and pulses at the national level, I think the public sector has some responsibility to provide enhanced germplasm to all the players who are involved in that crop. And I think it can be done. I have done it myself. And actually in maize, I will propose to Dr. Dakshit, I'm even ready to fund that kind of project, how to do it in a very simple and cheap way so that we create some kind of pedigree population, go up to S3 bulk and then distribute to everybody who needs it. So, and that also will create a little bit better public-private relationship. That is also very, very important. One thing which I have learned from my own experiences, we cannot, have projects for this disease, that disease, all those kinds of things. So we need to think of a single strategy which is multidisciplinary, multi-purpose strategy, which can solve all the problems and also keep all the different disciplines also have an important role to play. So my own experience, the data which I have is there, once like in case of maize, I had about 300 very elite lines, which I selected over a period of time from different backgrounds. I evaluated those lines, for drought, for nitrogen use efficiency, for borers, for Spodoptera, aluminum toxicity, streak virus, scent virus, for all these different kind of water logging, high density, low density. And I was surprised to see, the lines which were never selected for these traits. You always have some frequency of lines which are tolerant to this. One good example is there, like in Hyderabad when Dr. Zaidi, he evaluated, different hybrids from different companies and also from national program. He found one hybrid from Chegal Foundation, which was highly tolerant to water logging. And this hybrid has never been selected for water logging. Same thing happened, in my case, two lines which were selected for aluminum toxicity, they were never selected for that kind of trait. And those two lines are still being used as a tester in that kind of program. So I think there are a number of things there. So I think one thing which is common across all program is, the development of pedigree population, how we make what kind of science-based principles we can use, how we can advance it, what are the options that are available. I think that is one thing we need to consider. Another thing which I would very much like is that we should create a hybrid group across crops, which could meet and exchange experience of different crops. Like in my case, I have been giving lectures, at least the experience of cross-pollinated crop which can be used in the self-pollinated crop. So, there are a number of things here, which can be done here, So I think in my talk, which is 10 minutes, I will elaborate some of these more important points. But we need to have a germplasm management system, how the flow of germplasm takes place. We should have better understanding of germplasm. Then if we are working in hybrid program, there have to be clear-cut heterotic grouping of the materials. And then I think we need to think, how we can, evaluate more lines by making less number of hybrids. So that is very, very important. So I think there are a number of things which I think, when some important people get together, exchange ideas, some new ideas will also emerge. We can learn from each other from this kind of work here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for very useful suggestions. And The one relating to investment, yes, investment in agriculture needs to be increased, not decreased. Then public sector and private sector participation is critical. And how do we share genetic resources is also very critical and very important area. Important point regarding single discipline to multidisciplinary approach is key now, because looking into resources and also looking into the contribution which different disciplines can make. Important point relating to hybrid group creation involving different crops and commodities is a very important thought, and yes, this needs to be looked into. So thank you very much, sir, for your very useful input in this discussion time. Thank you.
Sir, can I just make a point, a small point, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. My name is Arvind Padi. I'm the country director, but I'm just tempted to speak on something which has not been told so far. And I would highlight on the delivery part. In fact, in many states, the extension system is almost crumbling, or they have crumbled. And the vacancies in the extension system is also very huge. Because I have been commissioner of the department in my home state. And I know if we do not strengthen the extension delivery side, the technology transfer would be not bringing the right results. So if you think, then as a part of the recommendations, we could talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Extension communication, very important. And we must have a strong extension machinery available in these states. Thank you very much. Yes, last speaker, last person who wants to make any intervention at this stage, please.
Chairman, sir, I am H.S. Gupta. Can I come in?
Yes, why not, Dr. Gupta? Yes, please. Go ahead.
I would like to flag two issues. One is in the inaugural session, Professor R.B. Singh emphasized, and very well, very rightly emphasized, that along with increasing production, we must also keep an eye on quality, because malnutrition has become a big problem. And it's not only protein, but protein, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals. Today, almost 70% of our population is protein deficient. It was very pleasing to see Dr. MP Singh's presentation, where we are almost going to be self-sufficient with 23 million tons of production and import of just 2 million tons. But another source we have not been exploiting efficiently is soybean. Soybean is a protein-rich crop. It's 40% protein, 20% oil. But it is mainly used as oil and less used as a protein source. Therefore, I would request that along with all the food grains, when we deal with it, when we deal with the cereals and pulses, in that we should also include soybean. And inaugural session, it was it was flagged again that we have around 10 million or 11 million hectare area under soybean, but our productivity is just 1 ton per hectare, 1.1 ton per hectare, whereas in US it is around 3 ton per hectare. So, and this is mainly because our genetic base in soybean is very narrow. So what we need to do, we need to move in a concerted manner and get the germ plants from all over the world and see that increase the productivity of soybean, and on one hand, and on the other hand, we try to use it as a source of protein.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta. Yes, in the morning also, Dr. Paroda mentioned that inclusion of soybean regarding in this food grain groups. Yes, this is a policy matter. Yeah, let it be recommended that such crops should also find a place in the staples. Okay. Then yes, emphasis on quality. You might have seen on almost all the crops there is good emphasis, but more needs to be done. And for that, particularly you highlighted about narrow genetic base of soybean is an important point which you have mentioned and will be quite useful as a recommendation to the soybean group. Thank you very much for your interventions.
Sir, is there any time left for
Now,
some intervention still?
For Dr. Bhagmal, there is always time, and you will be the last speaker.
Thank you, sir. Just I will not take very long. In fact, in most of the crops, the use of our germplasm is in fact very low. We have a huge collection in our national gene bank, which is now almost 4.4 million, which is a big number. Some efforts have been made in the past, perhaps in case of wheat and in case of maize, as Rakshit has pointed out, that some germplasm have been taken out from the gene bank and have been evaluated for various traits. When we are thinking of particularly the disease resistance, pest resistance, biotic, abiotic, all kinds of resistance in the varieties and also biofortified varieties, there is a great necessity that our existing germplasm, which is in our gene bank, must be evaluated. So efforts to that extent by all institutes who are working, all organizations working on these crops should take care of that maximum germplasm should be made use of. That is one point. Second is the pre-breeding aspect is almost lacking now. It is being done to some extent, but it is not as it was being done in most of the crop in the past. So the focus should be on pre-breeding aspects as well. Third point is that we know that horizontal expansion is not possible. And if we have to bridge the gaps, we must seriously think about the intercropping within the same land. How can we have the compatibility of these crops which can be grown together? So some kind of experimentation on those and development of varieties from that angle of those two companion crops which can go together, perhaps that would be one aspect from which we can increase our productivity and production. Thank you.
Well, we like to have more discussion, but the time is not permitting. Thank you all, and thank you for other participants for listening, and they can give their comments or their suggestions. Chat box is open, and they can contribute in that. That will be very useful to all of us. You will agree that we had a very good session, and all the presentations were very informative and useful. And there are certain areas where pinpointedly the roadmap has been indicated, and we are really thankful to all the speakers. And I would like that Dr. Sharma, who is the co-chair in this session, makes his remarks to close the session. And I'm thankful to you all for your patience and contribution. Dr. Sharma, T.R. Sharma.
Thank you very much, sir. You have very nicely concluded the session, but I would like to say that we had 5 presentations and 9 very good suggestions from participants, 9 participants. So we have made note of all the suggestions which have come from during the discussion time. And most of the things probably we have started now, but what Dr. Bhagmal is saying about using germplasm utilization and pre-breeding, Pre-breeding is a very important activity of all the institute now. For the past 1 year, we have started it now. And similarly, it is mandatory to develop breeding population and also mapping population across the year, across the institutes. But as far as this particular session is concerned, we had very interesting talks and discussion after that. And sir, you have very nicely concluded it. I would like to thank you very much for chairing the session. And I would like to thank everybody sitting here and participating in very important discussion. And we would be meeting now at 2:30 for the next session. Thank you very much. We can break for lunch.
Thank you.
you.